Chapter 1003. At 4:50 p.m. on Friday, Yang Yi arrived at the entrance of Huijia Primary School early, just like the other parents who were waiting for their children to finish school. However, Yang Yi had to guide Shi in her drawing today, so he didn't just wait at the school entrance. Yang Yi casually used an excuse to register with the guard and walked in. Yang Yi was very familiar with Shi's classroom, so he easily walked to the building where Shi was. When Yang Yi arrived, the classroom was still quiet and empty. But soon, as the bell rang, the whole school seemed to be boiling with excitement. Not long after, every corner of the school was filled with all kinds of excited shouts. It was the same for the first grade building. Children who had just finished their interest classes quickly emerged in the corridor. There were also children who packed their bags before going to their interest classes and went straight home after school, like Shi sometimes. However, there were still many children who went back to class before going home. Some of them were on duty to clean the classroom, so they hurried back, wanting to quickly finish sweeping and go home. But why was there an adult standing outside the classroom? They first looked at Yang Yi strangely, then lowered their voices and whispered to each other as they ran to the back of the classroom to get brooms and spatulas. Although they were very curious about Yang Yi's identity, children at this age didn't know Liang Jingru, so they didn't have the courage to take the initiative to talk to an unfamiliar adult. Of course, they also didn't remember seeing Shi's father at last year's parent-teacher conference. Children at this age wouldn't remember these things. Yang Yi was afraid of scaring these children, so he wore an amiable smile. His eyes swept over the children running by from time to time, hoping to see the figure of the little girl he was worried about. Exiner, we have to go up. We still have to draw and can't go home. Downstairs, Yang Yi caught a clear cry that was mixed in with the noise of many children. Yang Yi stuck his head out to take a look, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Sure enough, after a while, Shi and Lan Xin, the two little girls who went to the library for reading class, ran up. Papa! Shi was pleasantly surprised to see her father. The little girl didn't think that her father would come up so early. She screamed and happily threw herself at her father and hugged him tightly. Seeing Shi and Lan Xin leading a tall and burly adult into the classroom, several boys who were sweeping the floor suddenly widened their eyes and looked at Yang Yi with some fear. When they were outside, they didn't feel anything. But when the adult walked into the classroom, in the small space, his tall and burly figure suddenly gave them a terrible pressure. They were like kittens that saw a big tiger and didn't dare to say a word. In the middle of the classroom, there was a little girl who was packing her school bag. When she saw this scene, she ran over curiously and got close to Shi and whispered, Shi, who is this uncle? This little girl seemed to have a good relationship with Shi. This is my papa. Shi giggled and looked very happy. She took the initiative to introduce, Papa, this is Yuqian. We are going to do the blackboard bulletin together. It turned out to be the little girl Du Yuqian. Yang Yi smiled and nodded to her. Du Yuqian was more surprised. Her eyes widened and she said in surprise, You are Shi's father? The father who drew Ding Dang? Well, there seemed to be a problem with the logic of this question. After exchanging pleasantries for a while, Yang Yi was pulled to the back of the classroom by Shi, who couldn't wait any longer. Shi pointed to the big blackboard at the back and eagerly waited for her father to teach her how to draw Ding Dang. In the past week, Shi and her friends had put a lot of effort into the blackboard bulletin. Now, several areas had been planned on the blackboard and were outlined with beautiful lace. At least in terms of design, Yang Yi felt that these little girls had done a good job. One of the areas had been filled in with content. It was probably a poem that Nan Xiaoyu helped to copy when Shi drew Ding Dang yesterday. Yang Yi took a look and found that Nan Xiaoyu's handwriting was not bad. Every stroke was written beautifully and powerfully. Compared with his father, the great calligrapher Nan Diyun, there was still a big gap. However, among these first-grade children, he could definitely be called a crane in a flock of chickens. And this poem was actually the long ballad. Yang Yi felt that the last two sentences were quite suitable for these children. These patterns were all designed by you? That's a good idea. By separating the content, it won't look too messy and it's much more refreshing. Yang Yi smiled with appreciation. This is what Sister Xiaowei taught us. Many classes in the 3rd grade draw it like this. Cici blinked her eyes and said, I drew it here. Du Yuqian couldn't help but interrupt. She waved her little hand in front of the blackboard and even jumped, gesturing to Yang Yi. I also drew it. I drew it here. Lan Xian saw the situation and couldn't wait to take credit. You are all very good. Well done. Yang Yi smiled and praised. But it still needs to have ding dang to really look good. She pouted and said sullenly, Dad, don't just look at it. She had been waiting to draw ding dang. She had already erased what she drew yesterday. Now, there was a large blank space in the middle of the blackboard. She was eager to draw it earlier so that the friends who laughed at her drawing of ding dang yesterday could look at her in a new light. Coming. Wait for Dad to get something. Yang Yi smiled and walked back to the podium. How to teach she how to draw a ding dang on a big blackboard. Yang Yi had already thought about this problem at home. He took a wooden triangular ruler from the podium that was given to teachers by the school. Seeing Yang Yi take out such a big gesture, let alone she, even Lan Xian came over to watch curiously. Du Yuqian, Nan Zhaoyu, who just came to help, and a few other children followed Yang Yi. She, when you want to draw a picture on such a big blackboard, you have to learn the composition. Yang Yi pressed the triangular ruler on the blackboard, turned his face, and said to she with a smile, You have to think about how to move the picture on the blackboard according to the correct proportion. She didn't understand these nouns at all. She looked at her father with some confusion, waiting for him to explain. But fortunately, she didn't need to fully understand these principles. Soon, she saw her father take the original copy of the ding dang that she used to copy. He gestured to her and said, Look, this ding dang, isn't it the head? It's the same proportion as the body, right? The head is a little bigger here, but it's actually not that big, right? She nodded gently. She understood this. Yang Yi took the triangular ruler again and gestured in the big blank space in the middle of the blackboard. He used the chalk to poke small dots and dotted lines on it. Let's plan it like this. You can draw the head of the ding dang in this area. Of course, we've left a space for the dragonfly. The next area, draw the body. The space is about the same as the head, but when you draw it, you can draw it a little smaller. Little dots and dotted lines. After a while, she, who was watching her father work with all her attention, was surprised to see that there were areas on the blackboard that could be filled with various parts of the ding dang. Her father seemed to be helping her break down a very complicated picture into simple parts by simple decomposition. Her father was so amazing. She's eyes lit up as she looked at her father with admiration. Can you see it? Yang Yi turned his head and saw she's expression. He knew that his strategy had succeeded. He smiled and asked, Isn't it much easier to draw like this? She nodded her little head happily. However, Du Yuqian, Lan Xian, and Nan Zhaoyu had never taken drawing lessons. They were not like she who had watched her father draw since she was a child. They were confused and shook their heads in confusion. They muttered, I can't tell. Well, these children did not know how to compose a picture. They did not know how to draw a complete picture step by step from the beginning to the end. Naturally, there was no way for them to tell what the ding-dang looked like from Yang Yi's messy little dots and curves. It's okay if you can't tell. Later, she will draw it out and you'll see the effect. Yang Yi smiled and comforted them. Yang Yi moved an empty table over and said, Come on, she, it's your turn to draw. She was eager to try, but she was not very confident. The little girl looked a little shy. She intertwined her two little hands and twisted her body on the spot. She whispered coquettishly, Papa, can I draw it myself? Yes, you can draw it yourself. But Dad will be watching, and he will guide you to complete it. Don't worry, Yang Yi said encouragingly. Okay then. When she heard that her father would guide her, she immediately regained her confidence. She smiled sweetly and actively stretched out her two little arms. Usually, She had to step on the stool before she could step on the table to draw. Now that her father was here, she did not need to go through so much trouble. Yang Yi reached out and hugged the little girl like a princess. She was carried and flew onto the table as if she was riding on clouds. Chapter 1004. Although she had her father's guidance, it wasn't possible for Shi to draw a large ding-dang in such a short time. What's more, Shi didn't draw very well at the beginning. She repeatedly erased it several times until only the afterglow of the setting sun was left on the horizon. Only then did she gradually get into the mood and draw the outline of the ding-dang. Of course, this was also because Yang Yi was just watching from the side and didn't help. If Yang Yi were to draw it, they would probably have gone home by now. It's worth mentioning that although her father didn't help, Shi also showed a strong tenacity. It seemed to be different from her performance yesterday when she was discouraged from drawing. Now the other children had gone home with their parents. Even Nan Xiaoyu, who came to help copy some articles, was taken home by his mother. In the classroom, only Lan Xian was left. She was still sitting on the chair by the side and waiting foolishly. Uncle Yang said that in order to reward her patience for waiting for so long, he would treat her to dinner tonight for free. Thus, the little girl was relieved. Maybe it was because her father was watching by her side? She mustered all her strength and wanted to do something that she was interested in well. This scene made Yang Yi feel a little touched. But the progress was indeed a little slow. Yang Yi overestimated Shi's ability and underestimated the difficulty of the task. Well, let's come to school tomorrow to draw again. Yang Yi reached out and pulled Shi's little hand, which was still moving towards the blackboard, and said with a smile. Shi looked at her father with some confusion and said, But tomorrow is the holiday. We don't have to go to school. Yang Yi smiled and said, It's okay. Dad can borrow the key from your class teacher and then bring you to school to draw alone. There's still a lot of time tomorrow. I'm sure you can draw it well. Now, don't let your mother wait at home. Okay. Since her father said so, Shi obediently agreed. She stretched out her two little arms and asked her father to carry her down. It was another arduous journey, but Cici liked the feeling of hugging her father. Now that she had grown up, she rarely allowed her father to carry her while walking. Go, wake Xian air up. After Yang Yi put the little girl down, he smiled and pointed to Lan Xian. Lan Xian was so bored that she fell asleep on the chair. She tilted her little head and leaned comfortably against the back of the chair and slept. She didn't know what delicious food she was dreaming of, but she was almost drooling. Yang Yi went to clean up the table that Shi had just stepped on. There was a cloth next to the window. Yang Yi took it and wiped the table clean. In addition, the used chalk was neatly put back into the chalk box. She was responsible for waking Lan Xian up. The little girl took a big step and jumped in front of her good friend. Suddenly, she made a bang sound with her mouth, trying to scare her. Unfortunately, she was not good at pranking others. Just as she made a sound, she couldn't help but giggle. She couldn't help it at all. Lan Xian, on the other hand, was startled by the sound. She raised her head in a daze and only came back to her senses when she saw Cici laughing while hugging her belly. She wiped her mouth and mumbled in confusion, Huh? Ah. Is it time to eat? There will be food when we go back. We should go back. Yang Yi wiped the table clean, picked up the cloth, and said with a smile, Let's go. Xian air, do you want to go to the bathroom? Shi, you have to wash your hands too. After they finished cleaning up, they were ready to go home. Yang Yi walked out of the school gate with the two little guys. Wow, it's so late. Lan Xian looked at the reddish sky and said in hindsight. Looking at her confused look, Yang Yi gently shook his head. When Lan Xian got in the car, he helped the little guy fasten her seatbelt. She saw her father's head in front of them. She was talking to Lan Xian. Suddenly, the little girl exclaimed in a low voice, Oh! Yang Yi fastened Lan Xian's seat belt. He thought there was an accident, so he quickly raised his head and asked, What's the matter? She's beautiful big eyes blinked shyly. She pointed at her father's head, stuck out her little tongue, and said embarrassedly, Hee, Papa, there was the color of chalk on my hand, and then your hair turned white. Yang Yi gently touched the back of his head. He roughly understood that she accidentally got the powder on her hand on the back of his head when she came down with her arms around his neck. Papa, let me wipe it for you. She said diligently. It doesn't matter. I'll wipe it when we go back. Yang Yi smiled and rubbed she's little head with his clean hand. He didn't want she's hand to get dirty, so he just washed it clean. However, Yang Yi returned to his driver's seat. Before getting in the car, he reached out and patted the back of his head. The news of Yang Yi's appearance in Backwave Technology Company was finally exposed by the entertainment broadcaster Hans Jensen Entertainment Express this weekend. Although Hans Jensen Entertainment Express didn't have as many fans as Zhuozaiba, the news he threw out this time was quite significant. Soon, it was reprinted by some well-known entertainment broadcasters, and even paid by some news websites. Yang Yi is the boss of micro-broadcasting? How is that possible? When many people saw this news, they felt that it was too ridiculous. How could a singer in the entertainment industry be the boss of such a huge company like micro-broadcasting? This was even more unbelievable than the first time many people heard that Hu Haiquan of the Yuchuan Group was an angel investor who played with capital. However, a lot of the evidence provided by Hans Jensen Entertainment Express made people feel that it was somewhat reasonable. Han Sen didn't have any connections or abilities. He couldn't find out the real name of the boss of Backwave Technology Company, nor could he provide any concrete evidence. However, his ability to fabricate stories was top-notch. Other than the photos sent by the employees, the second evidence provided by Han Sen was the history of Backwave Technology Company. This wasn't difficult to find on the internet. Micro-broadcasting was born from a code written by a group of students from Zhongqing Media University. This was the official version. As everyone knew, Yang Yi used to live next to Zhongqing Media University. Now, he even had a coffee shop there. However, due to the frequent harassment of reporters, Yang Yi rarely went to the coffee shop. Of course, it was still difficult to convince people with just these two pieces of evidence. The third piece of evidence, provided by Han Sen, was really close to the truth. Back then, micro-broadcasting had made a name for itself by relying on micro-broadcasting movies. Especially during the first Micro-Broadcasting Cup micro-movie competition, it was in full swing. Many outstanding filmmakers emerged from that competition, and now, many of them had made a name for themselves in the entertainment industry. Moreover, the biggest winner should be the Fairy Tale micromovie, which was used as a demonstration piece by micro-broadcasting. This was considered a major milestone in the history of movies. Not only was it still exciting to watch, but the songs were also widely sung. Moreover, when the audience watched it now, they suddenly realized that this micromovie was filled with stars. This feeling was very magical. If everyone looked back and watched the low-budget comedy movies Nightclub and Crazy Stone, they would have the same feeling. Back then, the most famous person in this micromovie was Qin Wen. The other actors and directors were unknown. However, looking at it now, everyone would be surprised to find that the male lead of this movie was actually the popular Guazi, a big star whose variety show ability and acting skills were recognized by the audience. And hidden in this movie was Yang Yi, who could be considered a big shot in the entertainment industry. The screenwriter of Fairy Tale, Yang Yi, the lyricist and composer of Fairy Tale, Mu Xiang, was also Yang Yi. After the exclamation, the onlookers finally faced the possibility of what Han Sen said. If Yang Yi was not the boss of micro-broadcasting, why did he happen to appear here? Why did Fairy Tale not seek fame or profit? Such an outstanding work was just used as a footnote for someone else's micromovie competition? Other than this, Han Sen also posted a screenshot. It was the micro-broadcasting that everyone knew was Yang Yi's, She's family chef. The time when the first micro-broadcasting was released could be said to be the time when micro-broadcasting had not been promoted yet. Perhaps it was still in the internal testing stage? This was enough to prove that Yang Yi and micro-broadcasting had a very deep relationship. So, Yang Yi was really the boss of micro-broadcasting? After reading this news, many people forgot their previous thoughts that seemed to be nonsense and suddenly felt that it made sense. It seems that it's really possible? Micro-broadcasting was Yang Yi's own backyard. After this news caused a certain degree of popularity, it had already been notified to Yang Yi. Even Lu Yu, who was roughly aware, called to ask Yang Yi if he needed help. Soon, on Saturday afternoon, Phoebe Studio and micro-broadcasting officials issued an announcement, claiming that Yang Yi went to micro-broadcasting's company only because he was invited by micro-broadcasting to prepare a customized advertising song for them. They did not intend to explain to the public why there were so many coincidences between Yang Yi and micro-broadcasting. However, such an announcement could at least calm some of the surprised voices. That's right. Although Yang Yi is already very powerful, how can he be the boss of micro-broadcasting? That's too unbelievable. The onlookers changed sides one after another. If Boss Yang was the boss of micro-broadcasting, this would be fun. He would definitely be the first to ban Han Shenson's micro-broadcasting. Yang Yi's fans also started to ridicule below, but now that Han Shenson's micro-broadcasting is still alive, it's obviously just a rumor. It seemed that this storm that had not yet brewed was about to die down. Was that really the case? Chapter 1005. Chow Yaoli was an ordinary third-year student at Zhongqing Media University. She majored in music. It was the weekend again. Her roommate, He Amin, poked her head out from her bed and looked at Chow Yaoli, who was still reading a book on music anthropology. She couldn't help but complain, "Lily, are you still reading a postgraduate book? Don't you want to rest on the weekend?" Immediately, she suggested excitedly, "Lily, the weather is so good today. Why don't we go shopping? I haven't bought clothes for a long time." Chow Yaoli didn't continue to be a straight-A student. She smiled and agreed with He Amin's suggestion. The two of them changed their clothes and put on their makeup. After a long time, they carried their bags and went out, chatting and laughing. But at this moment, a girl from the dormitory next door opened the door with a phone in her hand. When she saw Chow Yaoli and He Amin, she smiled and said, "Hey Lily, Amin, I was just looking for you." "Why are you looking for us?" Chow Yaoli and He Amin asked curiously. "Did you sign up to be a public judge for the new program of Jiangnan TV station?" The girl waved the phone in her hand at them and said excitedly, "The program team is now recruiting public judges from all over the country." "New program?" He Amin asked in surprise. "What new program?" "I'm a singer." Chow Yaoli had some impression of this. She asked in surprise, "I'm a singer and they're recruiting public judges? What program is it?" He Amin was still confused. "It's a new music variety program that Jiangnan TV station and Yang Yi are working on together this year. You know Yang Yi, right? He's the awesome person who messed with China's Voice," Chow Yaoli said with a smile. For music students like them, pop music was not as charming as classical music. Although there were also people who chased after stars, Chow Yaoli and He Amin only listened to the songs and did not chase after stars as fanatically as others. "I remember now, Yang Yi. The guy who wrote Conquering Heaven." He Amin's eyes lit up and said, "I remember that he used to come to our academy to listen in. The teacher even mentioned his name." "That's right." Chow Yaoli nodded and smiled. However, even though Chow Yaoli and He Amin usually listened to classical tunes and old songs, Chow Yaoli and He Amin's interest was piqued when they heard the news from their roommate next door. After all, they were all young people. They were still at the age where they were hot-blooded and active. How could they not be interested in this kind of limelight? Could there be some shady dealings? He Amin asked worriedly. "I heard that the audience tickets for these shows are given to those with connections." "I don't think so. Their official micro-broadcasting has already said that the selection of the judges will adhere to the principle of fairness and justice. The list of the selected judges will also be made public online." The girl from the dormitory next door passed her phone to them and said, "Look, They want to recruit people who love music and have a certain appreciation of music. They want to recruit people from all 5 age groups. The judges for each episode are different, so there will be a lot of spots. I think that music majors like us, who are in Zhongqing, should have an advantage. Chow Yaoli and He Yimin huddled together and looked at their phones. After a while, the two of them looked at each other at the same time. They were both tempted. She came back from school a little late. She and her father had lunch outside. However, the little girl, who had the habit of taking afternoon naps, couldn't resist the heavy sleepiness. It was already past 4 in the afternoon, but she was still sleeping soundly in her bedroom upstairs. However, at this time, Lon Xian came to visit again. The little girl excitedly carried a small bag and ran into Yang Yi's unlocked yard. "Uncle Yang, where's she?" Lon Xian's loud voice came from Yang Yi's house across 2 lawns and a flower bed. Yang Yi was watering the flower bed. Murphy and Tong Tong were playing next to him. The little girl was very interested in the small puddle of water that her father made on the ground when he watered the plants. She was excitedly running around and stepping on it. She is still sleeping upstairs. Xian, do you have anything for she? Yang Yi saw through Lon Xian's intention and asked with a smile. She's still sleeping. The sun is shining on her but... Lon Xian came over and muttered loudly while looking at what Yang Yi was doing. She proudly lifted the bag in her hand and said to Yang Yi, "This is the nougat my father brought back from Guangdong province. My father went to Guangdong province on a business trip. He brought me this nougat, which is super delicious. I brought some for she." Yang Yi certainly knew that Lan Cao Kai went to Guangdong province a few days ago to attend the quarterly shareholders meeting of Sahara Online Mall. Yang Yi, the second largest shareholder, didn't go. Lan Cao Kai should have come back this morning. When he came back, Yang Yi was drawing with she at school. Lan Cao Kai called. However, the relationship between Lon Xian and she was really good. There were not many people who could let her take the initiative to share her favorite candies. Of course, she usually left some delicious food for Lon Xian. For example, before the new year, when Sister Ding Xiang came to make a cake at home, she left some for Lon Xian. Lon Xian remembered she's kindness. Nougat? This is not bad, but you can't eat too much at once. Otherwise, eating too much sugar will cause tooth decay. Yang Yi laughed. Lon Xian answered casually. When she saw Tong Tong, she took out a piece of nougat from the small bag and handed it to him enthusiastically. "Tong Tong, come here. Sister Xian will give you a piece of nougat." Little Momo didn't know what nougat was, but when he heard the word sugar and saw the nougat wrapped in a candy wrapper, his eyes lit up. He walked out of the water with a grin on his face and ran over excitedly to take it. "No, you're too young to eat it." Murphy quickly stopped him and signaled Lon Xian to put it away with her eyes. However, Tong Tong was smart now. The more his mother stopped him from eating it, the more he liked it. He shouted anxiously, No, I'll eat it." Yang Yi saw this and reached out to take it. He laughed and said, Okay. You can eat it, but not now. I have to cut it open for you before you can eat it." Since the nougat was a little hard, Yang Yi planned to cut it into small pieces. This way, the little guy wouldn't choke easily. Tong Tong was pestering his father, but his father picked him up with his big arms. He chuckled and brought him to the kitchen. Lon Xian blinked. She didn't understand why the adult said Tong Tong couldn't eat it and then said he could eat it. Forget it. She didn't care about them and ran upstairs to find she. Chapter 1006. It was a boundless sea of flowers. Not far away, her father, who was wearing sunglasses, was leaning against the side of the car coolly, looking at her. Cece was spinning and jumping around happily, and a few of her close friends were like little elves, laughing pleasantly as they circled around her. This was a very happy feeling. Until a seemingly heavy thumping sound broke the peace of this world. Cece seemed to see a huge shadow falling from the sky, covering the sky and the sun. Bang! The big bed in the master bedroom suddenly shook. She was confused. She had already woken up from the dream. Although she could not open her eyes, she still raised her head in a daze. What's going on? Hee hee. Lon Xian's familiar laughter finally sounded in Shi's ears. The little girl subconsciously squeezed half of her sleepy eyes open and looked at Lon Xian, who was lying on her stomach beside her and looking up at her. Suddenly, the little girl made a lazy sound. She didn't know whether she felt that Lon Xian disturbed her sleep or just wanted to moan for a while because she was too tired from sleeping in the afternoon. Hee hee, Shi, wake up, the sun is shining on your butt. Lon Xian showed her loud voice and finally woke Shi up from her half-asleep state. After a while, Shi stood by the bed, pulled her trousers and clothes, and put on her coat. Lon Xian, who was beside Shi, shouted excitedly, Shi, look, this is the nougat my father brought back from Guangdong province. I brought a lot of it for you. You can try it and see which one is better, your father's cooking or the one my father brought back. Lon Xian was referring to the batch of nougat made by Yang Yi last year. At that time, Shi put it in a small jar in the bedroom. Later, most of it was eaten by Lon Xian who came to visit. My papa cooks very well. She pouted and said unhappily. Give it a try. The ones your father made are softer, and the ones my father bought are harder, but there are a lot of peanuts. Lon Xian didn't care, and kept recommending. That's because my papa cooks better, Shi muttered in a low voice. Let me tell you, Shi, your brother likes you very much. Lon Xian continued excitedly, I gave him one, and then your mom said I couldn't give it to him. He wanted to snatch it, but your dad still gave it to him. Although she firmly believed that her father's culinary skills were better, it didn't stop Shi from tasting the nougat made by others. When she came back after wiping her face in the bathroom, the two girls sat on the sofa in the master bedroom. Lon Xian couldn't wait to tear open the candy wrapper and pass a nougat to Shi. Is it good? Lon Xian didn't wait for Shi to eat it. She put her hands on the sofa, half-kneeled, arched her little butt, and stared at Shi expectantly. She didn't have time to answer. She was chewing the nougat. After chewing a little and letting the nougat melt a little, she pouted her little mouth and said vaguely, It's delicious, very sweet. Hee hee, I told you it's delicious. Lon Xian said proudly. My papa cooks better. She was unhappy. She muttered and repeated this sentence. Lon Xian ignored her. She ran to Shi's bookshelf, took an empty jar from the top, opened it, and put the bag of nougat in it. Shi, you can't eat too much all at once. Lon Xian hurriedly closed the lid as she exhorted without even turning her head. Do you think Lon Xian will be like Yang Yi and talk about how eating too much sugar will lead to tooth decay? That's impossible. Lon Xian giggled and said, You have to keep some for yourself. I'll eat with you. This way, we can all eat nougat together. However, she didn't respond at this time. At this moment, Shi, who was sitting on the sofa, was frowning and her little mouth stopped chewing. Something's wrong. The little girl's mouth moved slightly in doubt. Soon, her frown deepened. After a while, Shi opened her little mouth, revealing her small white teeth. Of course, she couldn't see it. The little girl could only stretch out a finger and touch her teeth. Left, right, left, up, down. What exactly was wrong with him? Lon Xian's back was still facing Shi. She opened the lid again and reached her hand into the jar while nagging about the distribution of the nougats. We have 16 nougats. You can have 10, I'll have 6. I'm eating too little. Shi, you might not like nougats. Why don't I have some? Right at this moment, Lon Xian suddenly heard Cece's sobbing as she ran out. Lon Xian turned her head and looked at Shi's back in confusion. Huh? What happened? How about I give you all of it? Lon Xian muttered in a low voice after hesitating for a long time. Papa. She ran downstairs in a panic. The little girl's tears were about to fall. She anxiously looked for her father. But when she ran out of the house, she found that her father was not in the yard as Lon Exine said. "What's wrong?" Her father's warm voice sounded behind her. Cece turned her head and saw her father standing at the door of the house, looking at her with a smile. The little girl's tears were rolling in her eyes. At this moment, she ran over with small steps, feeling aggrieved, and threw herself into her father's arms. "Papa, my teeth are going to fall out." She sadly hugged her father's neck with one hand and pointed at her small open mouth with the other hand. Her voice was full of panic and grievance. "I didn't do anything disobedient. Why are my teeth going to fall out?" "Your teeth are going to fall out?" Yang-yi was a little surprised and asked, "How do you know?" "Papa saw that your teeth were fine." It's true. My teeth can move." She anxiously twisted her small buttocks in her father's arms, anxiously bared her teeth, and pointed to her father. When her father carefully observed, the little girl guiltily asked, "Papa, should I not eat candy? I ate Xin Air's nougat. It's hard. Come on, open your mouth. Papa will take a look." Yang-yi gently shook his finger on the tooth that she was talking about. Sure enough, Shi's feeling was not wrong. The little girl's lower incisor showed signs of shaking. Although Yang-yi did not think it was very obvious, this kind of shaking feeling was probably more deeply felt by the person involved. No wonder she was so scared. Was it really a tooth decay caused by eating candy? Or was it a tooth collapse caused by eating nougat? Yang-yi did not think it was possible, because Yang-yi usually asked Shi to brush her teeth. The little girl had a mouth of white and beautiful teeth. How could it be so easy to have a problem because of a candy? Yang-yi silently calculated in his heart. She was now almost 7 years old, and it was indeed the age of teeth growth. Therefore, under Shi's pitiful little eyes, Yang-yi smiled, rubbed her little head, and said, "It's not a problem with the candy. Just now, Papa ate the nougat that Xin Air brought. It's not so hard. You can still eat it." Tong Tong tasted the nougat just now, but the little guy did not seem to like the milk taste of the nougat. He did not even finish his small piece. Naturally, he ate the rest that Yang-yi cut for him. "However, you should eat less candy now, because you are now growing teeth." Yang-yi paused and explained, "Do you still remember Lu Weisha's teeth growth last year? You're also going through that stage now. It's normal for your tooth to be loose. After a week or so, it'll fall off and a new tooth will grow out." She listened to her father's explanation with her eyes wide open. The little girl looked at her father in disbelief, and her expression became more flustered. "Ah, why? Papa, I don't want to grow teeth. Woo, Papa, if I don't have teeth, it's so ugly." The little girl sadly hugged her father's neck and begged. She remembered very clearly that after Lu Weisha's teeth fell, there would be a black hole in her mouth, which was very ugly. Moreover, later on, Lu Weisha would lose a lot of teeth. She had seen it in the video chat with her. It's normal to grow teeth. Everyone needs to go through the process of growing up. Yang-yi smiled helplessly and tried to dissuade him. But why doesn't Xin Air grow teeth?" She said sadly. "I brush my teeth every day, but Xin Air doesn't." Speaking of Xin Air arrived. Lon Xin was running up the stairs, and her loud voice came, Shi, are you calling me? Oh, why did you suddenly disappear?" Chapter 1007. In order to ease Shi's worries and confirm whether the little girl was really going to have new teeth, Yang-yi even took her to the dentist. Of course, the result was obvious. Shi was about to have new teeth. However, the impact of the new teeth on Shi's life and studies had only just begun. During dinner that night, the little girl seemed to have no appetite. She grabbed the edge of her bowl with one hand and unconsciously pulled at her chopsticks with the other. Her father and mother had put some food in her bowl, but she had no intention of putting it into her mouth. "Why do you look so miserable and don't want to eat? Didn't the dentist say that this is normal? You just need to eat and rest normally, and you'll get better soon." Murphy saw this and tried to persuade her. However, the little girl still frowned and said unhappily in a low voice, "It's too hard." In other words, the food was too hard and would break her teeth. She was still thinking about the psychological trauma of eating nougat in the afternoon, which caused her teeth to loosen. Seeing this, Yang Yi asked Murphy not to persuade Shi. He went to get a new bowl and scooped some soup and carrots into it. In addition, he also put a few pieces of pork ribs into it. No pork ribs, no pork ribs. Cici understood what her father meant. She had been looking at him eagerly. Then, she shook her little hands and pouted her little mouth. Pork ribs. Daddy will help you tear them up before you eat them, okay? Yang Yi smiled and said, after you tear them up, you can use the teeth at the back to bite them. Then you won't touch the teeth at the front. Yang Yi put on a pair of special kitchen gloves and helped Shi remove the meat from the pork ribs. He tore them into strips of meat and then soaked them back into the soup. Shi stretched her neck and carefully watched her father tear the pork ribs. The pork ribs, which had been simmered in the soup until they were soft, tasted very delicious. With a gentle tear, the white meat floss and the gravy inside were exposed to the air, waving and emitting a rich meaty aroma. In fact, She was also hungry. Although she had no appetite, she couldn't help but swallow her saliva when she smelled the aroma of the meat. Murphy watched from the side and asked in confusion, didn't the doctor say that other than eating less sugar, he should eat more hard food? This will stimulate the teeth, promote blood circulation, and make it easier for the teeth to fall out? Yang Yi smiled and said, that's right, but you have to give Shi some time to adjust. Take your time. There's no rush. In addition, Yang Yi had checked the information. Those foods with hardness refer to those with high fiber content, such as fruits, carrots, corn, and so on. No matter what, Yang Yi felt that it was more important to let Shi maintain a good mood to eat, replenish her nutrition, and happily replace her teeth. Sure enough, after her father's adjustment, Shi didn't look as miserable as before when she drank the soup, even though she hadn't eaten yet. Yang Yi watched her as he ate. He saw the little girl carefully pick up a piece of shredded meat, open her small mouth, and directly put it behind her mouth with chopsticks. This way, it seemed like she didn't have to touch the front teeth. Then, she slowly chewed. At first, she was a little unskilled, but later on, Shi's movements gradually became smoother. She could use a small spoon to drink the soup while scooping up the shredded meat and eating it with her mouth. It seemed like it wasn't a big deal to touch the loosened lower teeth. Yang Yi didn't know if Shi felt this way, but he only smiled and didn't point it out. How can you not eat? You'll be hungry at night. Murphy looked at Shi worriedly and said to Yang Yi, it's okay. Who said that you have to eat dinner? Yang Yi smiled and said, as long as you eat and drink, it's okay. Those people in the West rarely ate rice, and they didn't seem to be hungry. Actually, replacing teeth isn't that scary. You just have to wait patiently for it to become looser and looser, and then gently move it, and it will fall off. Yang Yi smiled and said to Shi, it's like if you reach out and pull out your hair, you'll feel a lot of pain. But when your hair falls off naturally, like when you often lose a lot of hair in the bathroom or on the bed, you don't feel any pain, right? Shi blinked and felt that her father's words made sense, but she still had some doubts. But, why did Xin say that it was super painful when she went to do dental surgery? When Lan Xin described it to Shi in the afternoon, her eyebrows, eyes, nose, and mouth were all squeezed together in an exaggerated expression, which scared Shi. Because she ate too much candy, so she asked the doctor to do a minor surgery. Of course it's painful. This is why I told you to brush your teeth properly and protect them. Yang Yi said, but it's normal for you to replace your teeth, so it won't be very painful. Her father's words did make Shi feel a little relieved, but the little girl still felt a little uneasy about this unknown situation. No matter how her father comforted her, it couldn't be dispelled. Micro Broadcasting and Phoebe Studio did their public relations in a timely manner, and just enough to minimize the impact of Han Sen's exposure. However, neither the people from Micro Broadcasting nor Yang Yi considered that although Han Sen didn't have the ability to investigate the situation of the shareholders behind Backwave Technology Company, someone else could. For example, Although the Sahara Online Mall didn't disclose the shareholders' information to the public, the business investigation company hired by Lanzhou Kai still dug up Yang Yi's background. At the top of the capital pyramid, there was always a group of people who had more and more information. It just depended on whether they had the leisure to expose this information and risk offending a top tycoon. On Sunday night, a mysterious person called Han Sen's business number on micro-broadcasting. This phone number was used to contact some commercial cooperation such as advertising investment, paid reposting, etc. However, Han Sen was a lone wolf, so the person who answered the phone was Han Sen himself. Check your email. I just sent you the evidence that Yang Yi is the boss behind Backwave Technology Company. Although the mysterious person was mysterious, his voice wasn't processed. Who are you? Wait, let me see. Soon, Han Sen held the phone and said in surprise, "The filing of the equity allocation of Backwave Technology Company from the Industry and Commerce Bureau? How did you get this?" When I went to the Industry and Commerce Bureau to apply for an investigation, they didn't let me. They said that this file was confidential. Haha, I just used some inconspicuous tricks. The mysterious man chuckled. You guys are too resourceful. Han Sen sighed. Tell me, what do you want me to do for you to send this information to me? There was no free lunch in the world. Han Sen was a smart person and knew this. However, he was a little curious. With such precious information, why didn't the mysterious person ask for some benefits? We don't need your money. We just need you to leak this out tomorrow and make it big news, the bigger the better. The mysterious person said. I understand. You want to find trouble with Yang Yi or Backwave Technology Company. Han Sen's imagination was amazing. He guessed the main point immediately. That's not a problem for you to consider. Are you going to do this news? If not, I'll send it to other entertainment broadcasters tonight. The mysterious person was a little angry. Of course, I'll do it. Hee, I have to thank you guys for this. Han Sen thought about the benefits and attention this could bring him. He was so excited that he couldn't control himself and agreed. After the call ended, in Beijing's SNS headquarters, a young man put down his phone. He frowned and said to the middle-aged man behind him, President Hu, this entertainment broadcaster is so King hard to deal with. President Hu crossed his arms in front of his chest and snorted. Micro-broadcasting from Backwave is just like the people from it. They're all hard to deal with. President Hu, do you think we can change the situation by doing this? The young man was the son of one of SNS shareholders and was sent to the company to gain experience. Even though he was an assistant, he didn't speak too politely. It's difficult. We can only give Yang Yi some trouble and give him a headache for a while. For Backwave, it's impossible to hurt them. President Hu couldn't help but shake his head. NND. The young man couldn't help but curse. When we bought Facebook, we should have bought micro-broadcasting as well. Now we're raising a tiger. Chapter 1008. It was a new week. March was the time of spring in Zhongqing. The campus of Huijia Primary School was also filled with the aura of spring. The willow trees with thin willow branches were facing the morning sun, and pale yellow leaves were blooming. The most beautiful were the peach trees. Pink flowers adorned the branches, just like the cute smiling faces of children. They were pink and tender, making people unable to hold back their joy. On this beautiful morning, Cece, who had been depressed for the entire weekend, finally forgot about the fear of losing her teeth for the time being. She and Lanxin were dressed in neat and tidy school uniforms, carrying small school bags of the same style but different colors. They held hands and skipped back to their class. They were still early, and there was still some time before the morning reading class. However, the students of their first grade class 3, who had already arrived, were crowding around the back of the classroom, exclaiming one after another. What happened? Shi and Lan Xin curiously went over as well. When the two girls joined the crowd, the group of children was looking at the blackboard in amazement. Of course, everyone's eyes fell on the big and cute ding-dang on the blackboard. On Saturday morning, Yang Yi brought Shi over to draw the ding-dang. They had already finished the rest of the drawing, including the coloring of the ding-dang. They had used colored chalk and painted it bit by bit. Although the color was slightly lighter compared to the original drawing by Yang Yi, it was still a limitation of the chalk drawing. Apart from this small problem, Shi had drawn this large ding-dang to perfection. Especially that cute smiling face and those curled-up cat lips, people couldn't help but want to smile happily with her. Moreover, these children had not seen the original drawing. To them, this ding-dang was like opening a whole new world. At this moment, Wang Lei, who had read many books, was reading the short story attached to the drawing for everyone. As there were still some words that they had not learned before, everyone listened very carefully. A Doraemon suddenly came out of the drawer. Nobita was shocked. Who are you? Ding-dang. I am a robot cat from the future. My name is Ding-dang. Nobita. Are you from the future? I don't believe it. Ding-dang took out 2 bamboo dragonflies from the treasure bag on his stomach. Ding-dang. Let's go play in the sky. Nobita, I can't fly. How can I fly in the sky? Soon, Nobita and Ding-dang, who had bamboo dragonflies on their heads, flew into the sky like helicopters. Nobita, wow, Ding-dang, you're amazing. Ding-dang, of course. I still have many fun items in my treasure bag. I'll show them to you in the future. This short story had nothing to do with the real Ding-dang story. The story that Yang Yi told to Shi that night was much more complicated and exciting than this one. However, due to the limited space on the blackboard, Yang Yi could only make up a short story so that the children could understand the character to a certain extent through this short story. However, the effect was beyond Yang Yi's expectations. As Wang Lei slowly read the story, the children's eyes were filled with surprise, joy, and even envy. Some of the children stared at Ding-dang. Some of the children stared enviously at the bamboo dragonflies on Ding-dang's head. And some of the children stared longingly at the treasure bag on Ding-dang's stomach. Such a sci-fi short story made them yearn for it. Which child didn't want to have a friend as interesting as Ding-dang? Which child didn't want to fly into the sky and take a look? Which child didn't want to have a treasure bag with many magical items? Who drew this? It wasn't clear which child asked this question. Suddenly, there was a commotion among the surrounding children. They all looked at each other and looked around. At this moment, Shi was still a little shy. Lan Xian was still very proud, as if she had drawn it. She said loudly, I know. Lan Xian's loud voice immediately attracted the attention of all the children. Shi drew it. Lan Xian pointed at Shi, who was next to her, and proudly puffed out her chest. She said proudly, after school on Friday, I accompanied Shi to draw for a long time. Yes, to be able to draw such a beautiful picture on the blackboard, the military medal should be half as good as Xian's. Who asked you to accompany her so hard and be so tired? Shi looked at the amazed and admiring eyes of her classmates. She was also very happy. She smiled and said a little embarrassedly, My papa taught me to draw it. Our blackboard bulletin will look much better if I draw it like this. Shi, you and your father are so awesome. Wang Lei said enviously. However, before Shi could finish being happy, the other students excitedly asked, Shi, do you have any more? Do you have any other fun items for Ding-dang? Is Ding-dang a real cat? Does Ding-dang need to be charged? With so many questions, Shi was a little overwhelmed. Fortunately, she had only answered one of the items for the anywhere door. She received a burst of surprised exclamations from her classmates. The bell for the morning reading class rang, and Shi was saved. Not only these young children, but also every teacher who came to class today, when they saw the big and cute cartoon figure on the blackboard bulletin, couldn't help but find some excuse to go to the back of the bulletin to take a closer look. Lu Xianxian was the one who knew the truth the best among all the teachers. On Saturday, when Yang Yi took Shi to borrow the classroom key from Li Rulan, she was next to them. She had also heard Li Rulan talk about how awesome the girls on the blackboard bulletin were. However, This was the first time she had seen the actual effect. When she came to the math class in the third period in the morning, she was amazed at the ding-dang at the back of the classroom at first sight. Is this still a blackboard drawing that a child can draw? Lu Xianxian sighed in her heart. She knew that Yang Yi didn't interfere and let Shi draw it herself. That was why she was so surprised. Even if it was an adult, well, if it was Lon Lon who came to draw it, she wouldn't be able to draw it so beautifully, right? Of course, after being amazed, Lu Xianxian couldn't help but sigh at this cute cartoon figure. Although the drawing was drawn by a child, the design was definitely done by her father. Lu Xianxian looked at the short story next to her and thought to herself, "Sigh, who asked this Yang Shi to be a child from another class? Who asked her to have such a good father?" Lu Xianxian thought of her own class. She had to spend a lot of effort organizing, guiding, and helping to design the blackboard bulletin. Then, she compared it to the one in front of her. Teacher Lu's heart was bleeding. Chapter 1009. At around 11 in the afternoon, a black van stopped outside Huijia Primary School. Yang Yi pulled the handbrake and took out his phone. When he was driving just now, he had received a text message notification. Yang Yi had come to the school today to deliver lunch to Shi. After her lower incisor loosened, the girl had lost her appetite. She was fine at home, as he was taking care of her. Yang Yi was worried that the girl would not be able to eat the school cafeteria's lunch. It might be too hard. This was a critical time for her to grow. She could not eat well, sleep well, or be malnourished. She could not be skinny and sallow. Hence, after Yang Yi had prepared lunch at home, he had brought some from Tingshan District to Wuhu District to deliver lunch to the girl. But why was someone texting Yang Yi now? And it was not just once or twice. It had vibrated a few times. Yang Yi guessed that something had happened. As expected, Yang Yi saw a few messages from Backwave's top management. Some were from Mao Peifu, and some were from Lao Baihua. They did not dare to call Yang Yi rashly. The first few messages were asking if Yang Yi was free to answer the phone. It should not be a big deal, Yang Yi thought to himself. If it was a big deal, such as an emergency that would have a huge impact on the company, Lao Baihua would not dare to wait for Yang Yi's reply. However, it should be a big trouble. Otherwise, two professional managers would not text Yang Yi at the same time. Of course, in the third message, Mao Peifu gave him a brief summary of the situation. CEO Yang, Han Xiansen has exposed something again. This time, he got the documents from the government to change our shareholding. Now, many media outlets have reposted this report and confirmed your relationship with Backwave. We can't suppress the public opinion anymore. What do you think we should do? So that was how it was. Yang Yi wasn't surprised. He knew that he couldn't hide the truth forever. No matter how deep he tried to hide it, his investments would be exposed to the public one day. The public relations statement that Yang Yi asked both sides to issue was just to temporarily delay the exposure of his identity. However, before Yang Yi could think of how to reply to Mao Peifu and the others, Mo Xiaowan anxiously called him. She did not have as many scruples as Mao Peifu. "You want me to come up with an idea?" Yang Yi smiled and said, "Come up with an idea? Since it's already been exposed to this extent, let's make it public openly." Yang Yi was very calm, but Mo Xiaowan and the public relations team behind her were very troubled. Mo Xiaowan said in distress, "But we just clarified it on Saturday. If we admit it like this, won't it feel like we've been slapped in the face? Do we have to admit to our mistakes to the public and say that we shouldn't have lied to their feelings? Yes, the boss of Backwave is indeed our Yang Yi." Yang Yi understood what Mo Xiaowan meant. He thought for a while and said, "Okay, we'll discuss this matter in detail later and see how to solve it. I'm not free now. I'll go to the company in the afternoon. Can you help me inform Chairman Mao and General Lao that we'll have a short meeting in the afternoon?" It wasn't that Yang Yi was putting on airs, but that he really wasn't free now. Outside, the bell for the last morning class in Huijia Primary School rang. It was clearly heard on the road outside the school. Yang Yi had to go to the school gate to pick up Shi. When Yang Yi picked up Shi, he could tell that the little girl was in a good mood today. The teacher also said that it's good. Our nature class teacher even told us about the bamboo dragonfly. But he said that the bamboo dragonfly can't take us to the sky. Chen Yuxuan said that he really likes the story of Ding Dang. He even asked me when I'll get a picture book of Ding Dang. I told him that my papa is drawing it. Yu Qian and I were praised by Teacher Li. And Xin Xiao Yu, the teacher said that we have to continue working hard and finish the Blackboard Bulletin. We'll definitely get the award. She held her father's hand from the school gate and talked non-stop with excitement. She even forgot to look left and right when she was crossing the road. She only cared about telling her father about the compliments and praises she received this morning. Really? Yang Yi smiled and responded from time to time, then I'll have to hurry up and finish the Ding Dang comic. Since your classmates like it so much, we'll give each of them a copy. Okay. She said happily, it's just like the books that Sister Xiaowei's mom gave us. Yes, that's right. But let's not tell your classmates yet. We'll give them a surprise when the time comes. Yang Yi said with a smile. I think so too. They'll be very happy. She said with joy, by the way, Papa, can we also send one to Lu Weisha? She also likes Ding Dang very much. During the weekend, Shi video chatted with Lu Weisha on the internet again. In addition to talking about some interesting things about herself, the little girl mainly told Lu Weisha about her loosened teeth. Lu Weisha told Shi that it didn't hurt at all. This made Shi feel relieved. Okay. When the time comes, you have to write a letter to Lu Weisha in person. Now you can even write. Yang Yi said with a smile. Only when she was with her father could she chat so happily. Even her mother couldn't. Her mother didn't have the patience to talk to her. Moreover, who could be as powerful as her father? When she said something, her father could also reply. This kind of back and forth conversation was interesting. Back in the car, Yang Yi took Shi to sit in the back of the nanny van. Their nanny van was actually a modified version of an MPV, a shrunken version of a caravan. The back of the driver's seat was partitioned like an extended version of a car, forming an independent rest and reception area. The decoration was also very luxurious. Not only could the space between the seats be simple and easy to walk around freely, there was also a small bar, a small refrigerator, and even a foldable workbench. This workbench was used by Yang Yi as a dining table for Shi to eat. Come, let's see what Dad made for you for lunch today. Yang Yi smiled and took the insulated food boxes from the bar next to him. He opened them one by one on the workbench. The dishes were very sumptuous. There were 2 dishes, a soup, and a bowl of white rice. Although Yang Yi only let Shi drink a little soup on Saturday night, after she gradually adapted to eating with loose baby teeth, Yang Yi still coaxed her to eat rice. The adaptation process was necessary, but Yang Yi still understood that during the period of tooth replacement, she couldn't eat food that was too delicate. It was better to eat some hard food. Proper chewing would help her baby teeth to fall out better, and not still be attached to the top, clashing with the new teeth that were about to sprout. Dang 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 dang. Yang Yi's mouth was accompanied by his own background music. He smiled and introduced today's dishes to Shi. This is celery fried prawns. I don't like to eat celery. Shi was a little conflicted. Eating celery will help your new teeth grow out faster. Also, eating more of these fiber foods can make your teeth grow prettier, just like Mom's teeth, neat and white. Yang Yi half lied to the little girl. She was still a little smug. After hesitating for a while, she said hesitantly, okay. With celery fried prawns, the taste should be pretty good. There were 2 dishes and a soup. The soup was naturally the pork rib soup, but this time Yang Yi changed the ingredients. He used soybeans to boil the pork rib soup, and it smelled very delicious. She drank the soup while listening to her father introduce the second dish. The second dish has a name. It's called Golden Pearl Falling Jade. Yang Yi deliberately said in an exaggerated manner. Cece immediately giggled. Her eyes were curved as she laughed. She was overjoyed as she said, "That's not true. I can recognize it." She put down the small bowl she was holding, stretched out her white and delicate little finger, and pointed to the second dish. She said, "This is corn, this is dowdu, this is… what is this red one?" She couldn't recognize it for a moment. "This is carrot." Yang Yi smiled and said, "How is it? Dad, doesn't this dish look good and delicious?" "I also think it looks good." She raised her little head and looked at her father happily. Indeed, golden pearls fell like jade. Green peas, red carrots, and golden corn were mixed together. They were fried until they were sparkling and translucent, shiny and glossy. It was very appetizing at first glance. Then quickly try it. Yang Yi didn't wait for the rice. He scooped a spoonful for she and encouraged her to try it. The little girl's appetite was great, and she directly put the spoonful into her mouth. Finally, she excitedly gave a thumbs up and praised vaguely, "It's super delicious." As long as she liked it, it was fine. These days, Yang Yi had been thinking of ways to make all kinds of delicacies for Cece with these teeth-grinding ingredients, hoping that she could eat happily. Chapter 10:10. With solid evidence, Han Xiansen's Entertainment expresses previous and current information about Yang Yi being the big boss behind micro-broadcasting became even more convincing. Initially, many of Yang Yi's fans thought that this might be a coincidence. But when they thought about it carefully, whether it was China's The Voice or the Limit Challenge, there were indeed signs of micro-broadcasting and WeChat in their embedded advertisements. Even at the scene of China's The Voice's peak night, Yang Yi and the host used a newly launched WeChat that not many people knew about. Micro-broadcasting and WeChat did not seem to have paid Yang Yi any advertising fees or endorsement fees. Now, everyone was close to confirming this fact. However, all the onlookers were waiting for the official response from the Backwave technology company behind micro-broadcasting, or Yang Yi's studio. How would they respond? Would they admit that they had been slapped in the face? Or would they angrily denounce Han Xiansen's Entertainment Express for infringement? It seemed like Yang Yi's response was a little slow. At 3:30 p.m., Backwave Technology Company and Phoebe Studio, who had originally released their statements, remained silent. Instead, it was Yang Yi's own private micro-broadcasting that quietly updated their status. Micro-broadcasting's content was short and concise, leaving everyone dumbfounded. Alright, micro-broadcasting and WeChat are really useful. Everyone, come and try it out. What did this mean? Was it a tacit agreement? It seemed like it could be assumed that way. After all, other than Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting, Backwave Technology Company and Phoebe Studio did not give any further response. It was like Han Xiansen's Entertainment Express had exposed the truth. Such a heavy punch had landed lightly in the air. Let alone Han San himself, even the onlookers and entertainment media who were prepared to watch a good show felt like vomiting blood. Was there anyone who responded like that? He didn't refute, nor was he in a hurry to uphold justice. This was a very refreshing scene. But Yang Yi was just that willful. When he had a meeting with Mo Xiaowan and Backwave, he had told them to downplay the matter. This was a private matter, and there was no need to go against the media. Of course, Yang Yi's own micro-broadcasting was an ambiguous acknowledgement of his identity. But his attitude was also to comfort his anxious fans. It's fine as long as you know, it's not a big deal. According to Yang Yi's instructions, whether it was Backwave Technology Company or Phoebe Studio, they tried not to accept media interviews. Even if they had normal work requirements, they didn't talk about Yang Yi's situation. This caused a lot of people who were waiting to watch the show to die. The entertainment media could still rely on Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting to make up some news, but the people from SNS really wanted to vomit blood. In any case, you guys should at least create some chaos. This was such a big matter, yet you acted so nonchalantly. Under the storm, you should do what you need to do. They had spent so much effort to create this big news, but there was no result at all. It was really embarrassing. If these people saw the comments from Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting fans, they wouldn't be so confused. Low profile, wasn't that Yang Yi's style all along? Under Yang Yi's somewhat teasing micro-broadcasting post, the comments from the fans were also very interesting. Let's translate it to, disperse, backwave is mine, what are you guys worrying about? If you have the time, why don't you play with micro-broadcasting and WeChat, it's really useful. Yang Yi is personally advertising micro-broadcasting and WeChat, so he should pay the endorsement fee, right? Funny. Tisk tisk, this way of responding is a little too arrogant. But Yang Yi's actions don't seem out of place at all. Is he still as low profile as before? Yang Yi really liked to give everyone a surprise without anyone noticing. But it's also very normal. Back when he created the Limit Challenge, who knew that he had such strong variety show planning skills? Now, my heart doesn't have a single ripple. Even if you told me that SNS is also Yang Yi's, and that Sahara Online Mall is also Yang Yi's, I would still feel that it's very normal. As expected, he's the boss of Backwave. Back then, I registered micro-broadcasting because I wanted to keep an eye on Boss Yang, and now I can't help myself anymore. Speaking of which, I remember that there were reports that Yang Yi's net worth was at least 600 to 700 million, but that didn't include Backwave. Now, with Backwave, Yang Yi's net worth has probably broken through the sky, right? It had to be mentioned that after Yang Yi's response to micro-broadcasting, which didn't really count as a response, the entertainment media had already done some calculations for Yang Yi. Not to mention the rising value of China Star Productions in the past 2 years, just the Backwave technology company that Yang Yi owned was close to 80%, the other shares were distributed to Mao Peifu, the company's upper management, and employee incentives. With micro-broadcasting as a killing machine, and WeChat as a rising star in the mobile social software industry, Backwave Technology Company's market value was estimated by industry insiders to be over 10 billion, and this was the lowest estimate before it was listed. In other words, if Yang Yi's other income was included, his personal net worth was close to 10 billion? It was no wonder that many entertainment media exclaimed and crowned Yang Yi as the most invested star in the entertainment industry, and there was no other. Back at Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting, many fans who saw the news ran back and excitedly conveyed the news to Yang Yi. In the comments section, the fans proudly said, "Don't look at how our brother Yang usually doesn't show off and looks like he's always showing off. He doesn't look like a big star, but he's definitely the richest star in the entertainment industry." Teske, I suddenly feel that Mo Fei really has a good eye for talent. The previous report said that Mo Fei had a good eye for talent. When Yang Yi was still a poor boy, she already knew that he had potential. Now it seems that she is more than just a good eye for talent. It's like digging a diamond mine. All of you, show some respect. Don't keep calling Yang Yi and Murphy. They're my father-in-law and mother-in-law, do you understand? Upstairs, drag him out and beat him to death. She is mine. No, she is mine. Such a beautiful and cute little princess with a net worth of tens of billions at such a young age. How can I let you bastards take advantage of her? Friendly reminder, she still has a younger brother who wants to split the family fortune. I don't know how much he'll get. It doesn't matter how much. Even if she doesn't have money, I'll earn money to support her. Father-in-law, please accept a bow from your son-in-law. The comment section went off the rails. Many people fought to be the first to call Yang Yi father-in-law. However, wasn't this the usual behavior? When the storm started, the national media, whether it was entertainment, economics, or technology, they were all shocked that Yang Yi was Backwave's boss. However, for Yang Yi, this was just a small setback. Life still went on. She didn't know about the turmoil. The little girl was troubled by her shaking teeth while she worked overtime with her friends to complete their Blackboard bulletin. She strived for perfection. However, before the first task was completed, a new task appeared. This semester, Shi's science class arranged for all the children to do a small experiment that required them to do and observe at home. It was a bit like the experiment that the teacher asked them to observe Xiaoyu when they were in Springfield kindergarten. However, this time, Shishi needed to plant and observe plants. Chapter 10-11. Author's note: a book friend pointed out the common sense mistake, so it has been corrected. In the natural science class, the teacher did not ask for much homework, and it was a bit like an open-ended question. The children could freely choose the plants they wanted to plant, and they could also invite their parents to participate, but they had to clearly write in the experiment report what they had done personally. Of course, the most important thing was that the observation experiment report had to be submitted once a week, so that the teacher could see their progress and perseverance. "What do you want to plant?" Yang Yi asked with a smile. She was still very interested in this. When she got home, she did not even bother to change her clothes. Wearing her school uniform, she ran around excitedly with the natural science textbook. "I want to plant a peach tree. Papa, our school has very beautiful peach blossoms. Teacher-san has taken us to see them." The teacher-san that she was talking about was her natural science teacher. The little girl excitedly went to the floor-to-ceiling window in the living room, pointed to their yard, and said, "If we plant a peach tree at home, it will be very beautiful." Yang Yi did not know whether to laugh or cry, and said, "Peach tree? Peach tree can't do that. If you plant a peach tree, it may take several years to see results. Then you won't be able to submit the observation homework to the teacher." Hearing this, Shishi retracted her small hand and said with a little distress, "Is that so? Then, Papa, what should we plant?" Yang Yi carefully read the description in Cece's natural science textbook and said with a smile, "You're talking about growing vegetables here. The effect of growing vegetables is very fast, and it changes almost every day. If it doesn't work out, there will be new changes every week. So, you can choose some vegetables that you like to plant." She raised her small head and looked at her father attentively. After he finished speaking, she blinked and said, "Then let's plant apple. I also like apple very much." "Apple is not a vegetable, it's a fruit." Murphy, who was listening to the side, could not help but laugh. "I know this. How can you confuse it? But apple is also a vegetable. Papa sometimes makes a dish." She felt that her mother's words were not authoritative enough, so she pouted and argued. "Mom is right. Apple is a fruit, not a vegetable. Even if Dad made it into a dish, wouldn't that dish be called a fruit salad? It's not called vegetable salad, right?" Yang Yi smiled and patted Shi's shoulder. The little girl thought about it and reluctantly accepted her father's explanation. Yang Yi also reflected on himself. Just now, he had allowed Shi to choose. Was it too difficult for this young girl who didn't know much? Therefore, he thought about it and decided to narrow down the selection range for Shi. "Now, Dad will give you a few choices. There are cabbages and celery. Their characteristics are that they can be directly cultivated with the part of the root. However, they can be cultivated with celery or cauliflower, or with the leaves of carrots or carrots. These two kinds are different from the previous ones. They need the head of the carrots, which we usually don't eat. Of course, they are not carrots, but carrots and tassels, which are good for ornamental purposes like cauliflower." Yang Yi smiled and said to Shi, "There are also green beans, which can grow green bean sprouts, the kind that you like to eat very much. Potatoes can also be planted. Unlike the previous ones, they can be directly cultivated with the cut tubers." Yang Yi still had relatively rich agricultural knowledge from the memories of his predecessors farming in the countryside. At least, it was enough to deal with Shi's homework this time. As Yang Yi spoke with assurance, Shi and Murphy, who were next to him, listened with admiration. Murphy sighed with emotion and said, "How do you know so much?" "Papa, I want to plant all of them." Cece was very excited when she heard this. She took her father's hand and jumped up on her own. Her little face was very excited as she asked, "Papa, our house is so big. Let's plant them all, okay?" Murphy also said with interest, "Since you've planted them, let's plant more. I want to see it too." Yang Yi looked at Shi's small head and eagerly looked up. He smiled and said, "Okay, in that case, we'll plant one of each type. Since we have ingredients at home today, celery and cabbage, we'll plant celery. Celery is edible. The taste of cauliflower is average. As for radishes and carrots, we happen to have carrots at home, so we'll plant carrots, okay?" Shi's little face suddenly became a little conflicted. She slightly pouted her little mouth, twisted her body, and muttered unhappily, "But, Papa, I don't like celery." In the past few days, her father had let her eat celery several times. Although she tried her best to eat it in order to make her teeth look better in the future, she still didn't like the taste of celery very much. "Okay then. We'll plant cabbage. The cabbage will indeed look better." Seeing this, Yang Yi couldn't help laughing and said, "There are no roots of cabbage at home today. Papa will get you one tomorrow." Yes, I want to plant cabbage." The little girl happily opened her arms. Since the decision had been made, after dinner tonight, she couldn't wait to follow her father and start the preparation work of planting vegetables. "Come on, these are mung beans. Soak them in water first. Do it like you used to wash the rice when you helped Papa cook, but you have to clean up the mung beans floating on the water." Yang Yi took a glass bowl that was usually used to store fruit salad, poured 3 handfuls of mung beans into it, and then handed it to Shi. "Okay." Shi ran over attentively, took the bowl, ran to the sink, turned on the tap, and filled it with water. Yang Yi stood behind the little girl, watching her put her little hand in and pull it a few times. "Okay, pick out the mung beans floating on the water. Remember these steps you did today." Yang Yi said with a smile, "Our experiment has already started. You have to record these in your experiment report." Shi's little face tensed up, and her little mouth that was laughing just now also pursed. It was obvious that she was serious. The little girl carefully scooped out the green beans floating on the surface of the water with her 2 little hands as if she was scooping water. "Do you know why you have to fish out these floating mung beans?" Yang Yi asked with a smile. She shook her little head in confusion. Observe the difference between the mung beans floating on the water and the mung beans still under the water. Yang Yi didn't give the answer directly. She stopped what she was doing. Following her father's instructions, she picked up 2 different mung beans and observed them closely. "Be gentle with this one. It seems to be hollow." She looked back at her father with some surprise. "Yes, because these are the shells of the mung beans. Before they were sold to us, they might have been damaged during the production process, so they fell off the shell. The reason why we have to pick them out is that this kind of mung bean shell has no substance, so you can't grow mung bean sprouts." Yang Yi patiently explained to the little girl at this time. Chapter 10-12. The first day of dealing with the rhizomes, tubers, mung beans, and so on was just the beginning. What she needed to do after school the next day was the key to the entire planting process. For this reason, she didn't even have time to watch TV. As soon as she finished eating, she urged her father to take her to work. It was worth mentioning that Lan Xian also came to the house today. In the morning, she expressed that she was at a loss for the science homework. When she found out that she actually had to plant 4 kinds of things at once, the chubby little girl couldn't sit still. While expressing her envy for Shi and her father's ability, she said eagerly, "Shi, you already have so many. Can you give me one? Let's observe together, okay?" Lan Xian had a good plan in mind. Cici had already done the most difficult job of planting the plants, and she only needed to help observe them. How could there be such a good thing? Cici, on the other hand, was more generous and agreed generously. However, Yang Yi was still driving in the front. When he heard this, he stopped Shi from indulging her little friend's lazy behavior. Therefore, Lan Xian had dinner at Shi's house tonight. Lanzhao Kai and Wu Jingjing also came over. They wanted to accompany Lan Xian to observe Yang Yi and Shi's planting process tonight. After learning it, they also wanted to go back and imitate Lan Xian to do her homework. The sky was completely dark, but the courtyard of Yang Yi's villa was brightly lit. Yang Yi, Murphy, Lans Hao Kai, Wu Jingjing, and the three children were all gathered in front of several flower pots. These flower pots are beautiful, right? Murphy smiled and introduced them to Lans Hao Kai and Wu Jingjing. Yang Yi also said that he was going to buy some plastic flower pots that were thickened to imitate ceramic. He was afraid that she couldn't lift them. I told him that after filling them with soil, the effect of these flower pots would be the same. It would be very painful to lift them up, so it's better to buy real ceramic ones. They can't move them, so they can only watch from the side. This way, it will be better. It had to be said that Mo Fei's aesthetic sense was very unique. The ceramic flower pot she bought, the printed pattern on it was simple but not simple. It was a bit like the lines of an abstract style, giving people a very simple but meaningful feeling. Lans Hao Kai was strong. He picked up a big flower pot and looked at it carefully with Wu Jingjing and praised it. What are we going to plant now? Lan Xian and Cici weren't particularly interested in the flower pots. Instead, the two girls were already holding the tools that they had prepared, looking eager to give it a try. Lan Xian was holding a small three-fingered rake in her hand. It looked a bit like a chicken claw and was the size of an ordinary screwdriver. It was just right for Lan Xian's small hand to hold it firmly. She was about the same. She was holding a small shovel with a sharp beak, a pink plastic handle, and a metal shovel. It wasn't just the two of them. Seeing how lively his sisters were, little Momo also carried his plastic shovel and followed behind his sisters. His face was full of excitement, as if he was about to do something big. We are going to plant radish leaves, cabbage flowers, and potatoes. She enthusiastically introduced to her friends. Papa said that green beans don't need to be planted in the soil, so we are only going to plant these 3. But you have 4 flower pots, Lan Xian said with some confusion. Because the last flower pot is for you. You can take it back and plant vegetables like she. Yang Yi smiled and patted Lan Xian's shoulder. The process of planting the soil was needless to say. Yang Yi and Lans Hao Kai carried the black soil they bought for planting flowers and poured it into the pot. Big flower pots and fertile soil. Wouldn't it feel like a cannon was killing mosquitoes after making such a big fuss just to plant cauliflower and carrot tassels? But Yang Yi loved to play. Since he was going to guide she to do an after-class practice, he had to create the best conditions. However, although the soil was not fresh, the little ones were very excited. As soon as the adults finished pouring the soil in a flower pot, they squatted next to them and couldn't wait to work. Lan Xian used her chicken claw rake to loosen the thick layer of soil. Unfortunately, this rake was a little too short. No matter how hard Lan Xian tried, it was as if she was scratching an itch for the soil. She only scratched the surface layer once. She was also next to Lan Xian. She giggled and used her sharp beak to dig a few small ravines in the soil. Tong Tong's movements were half a beat slower. The little guy's small mouth was slightly open. His lower lip, perhaps because of the accumulation of saliva, was sparkling and rosy. He blinked his round eyes and looked at his sisters for a long time before he remembered that he also wanted to play with them. Hey! Tong Tong raised his delicate eyebrows and used a bit of strength to pick up the small plastic shovel that he was dragging on the ground. Then, he held it with both hands and walked over excitedly. However, just as he raised the small shovel high and inserted it into the soil, before he was ready to dig and play, the eyes of the 2 sisters next to him lit up. Little brother, your shovel is bigger than ours. She felt that the small tools that her father prepared for her and Lan Xian were a bit small. It was very difficult to deal with this big pot of soil. Yes, his is bigger than ours. Lan Xian egged. She, why don't we use your brother's shovel? This way we can loosen the soil quickly. Okay. She did not feel that there was anything wrong with borrowing her brother's shovel. She smiled and agreed to Lan Xian's suggestion. Then, she reached out to grab the small shovel that Tong Tong was still adjusting his position. Before Tong Tong could play, he was restrained by his sister. He looked at his sister in confusion. Fortunately, she was not particularly domineering. She met Tong Tong's eyes and said, "Little brother, can you play with it for a while?" Tong Tong understood her words. The little guy looked at his sister innocently. He could not resist, so he hesitated for a while before he let go of his little hand. My little brother is very obedient. He's not like Chan Shuyun, who always fights with her brother. She immediately pulled the small shovel over with satisfaction. She even proudly praised her little brother to Lon Xian. After Tong Tong let go of his hand, he began to feel conflicted. That's not right. I want to play too. Why should I give it to my sister? Was my sister taking it away from me? Tong Tong frowned at the side. He was hesitating whether he should ask his mother for justice. But at this time, he also heard his elder sister and elder sister Xian praising him. Although the little guy couldn't fully understand, he still felt a positive energy of praise from the two elder sisters' conversation. At this moment, Lon Xian was fighting with Shi over the shovel. She chattered, Shi, let me tell you. I think your little brother has a lot of fun toys. Did he let you play with them? Of course. She said proudly to Lon Xian, my little brother has a lot of toys. I even bought them for him with gold coins. He really likes them, so of course he would let me play with them. He's that good. Lon Xian looked at Tong Tong enviously. She did not know if she was envious of Shi for having a little brother who shared his toys with her, or envious of Tong Tong for having a sister who was willing to spend gold coins to buy toys for him. Because he's my little brother. She felt proud of being able to make Lon Xian envious. She happily pulled Tong Tong in front of her, hugged him, and kissed the little guy's tender cheeks. Then, she looked at Lon Xian proudly. Tong Tong felt a bit more saliva on his cheeks. He wiped his face with his small hands and smiled innocently. The little conflict from before seemed to have disappeared. Chapter 10:13. The clock quietly reached 9 o'clock, and the night gradually deepened. In the master bedroom on the second floor, a little girl wearing a pink nightgown with a rabbit pattern printed with a butterfly knot was sitting in front of the desk in the bedroom. She was holding a pen and seriously writing something. Shi and Lon Xian spent a lot of time planting tonight. Now, they had just finished work and had just taken a shower. The little girl's thick and long hair was lazily draped over her shoulders. It was still a little damp and looked slightly curly. It also had a unique charm. The little girl also wore a rabbit ear headband on her head that could fix her flirtatious bangs. Her delicate and cute little face was exposed after breaking free from her hair. Her skin was white and rosy, and it was as delicate as cream. The most attractive thing was her big bright eyes. They were sparkling, and they were also lively and cute. Xian what did Xian do? She helped me loosen the soil. The little girl was writing the day's experiment record. However, this was a big challenge for Shi. After writing a few sentences, she had to use a pencil to support her chin and think for a long time. Yesterday, the little girl had already learned to write an experiment record under her father's guidance. Although she was not very skilled and was not very formal, she learned very quickly. After taking a shower today, the little girl did not wait for her father to guide her. She excitedly planned to write on her own first. In a while, I'll show it to Papa. Papa will say, Shi, you're so amazing. The little girl thought happily in her heart. Yangshi's Planting Observation Diary, March 6th. Wednesday, sunny day. I planted it with my father. My mother bought a very beautiful flower pen. There are a lot of them. I also gave one to Lon Xian. She helped me loosen the soil. My father and I planted radish heads, cabbage heads, and potatoes. My father and I gave them water and changed the water for green beans. We hoped that they would grow up quickly. It didn't seem that difficult after all. The clever girl pondered for a long time and finally finished writing it. There were some words that she didn't know how to write, so she also used pinyin to replace them. Her father told her to use pinyin to replace them first, and then she could find the unfamiliar words in the dictionary later. After she finished writing, she raised her head happily and looked at the door. Her father hadn't finished showering yet and was coming over to check her experiment records. The little girl couldn't wait to show her father what she had written. "Can you write a little more?" She tilted her head and mumbled to herself. Since she had nothing else to do, she continued to write down the wonderful ideas that came to her mind. Dad said that a long time ago, Jack could plant a bean, and then it would grow into a very long XX. She didn't remember this part, so she left it blank. It could stretch to the sky, and there was a sky that would rain gold. I planted a lot of green beans. Can you take me and Dad to the sky to play? I want to ask God for a super beautiful golden Dan. She spent more than 10 minutes pondering over these 2 paragraphs and finally wrote them down. After she finished writing, she was quite satisfied and admired herself for a long time. Finally, there was a gentle knock on the door of the master bedroom, and then Yang-yi pushed the door open and came in. "Papa." She jumped up from the chair happily and jumped down. She grabbed the exercise book that she used to write the experiment report and ran to her father with a grin. "Look at what I wrote." The little girl handed the exercise book to her father, but she was still not satisfied. She took her father's hand and pulled him to the chair, so that he could sit at the desk and, carefully, check her work. She leaned against the desk, crossed her 2 little hands behind her back, and looked expectantly at the expression on her father's face, hoping to see the first look of appreciation on his face. There were only a few paragraphs, more than 100 words of content. If you don't count the latter part, it should be less than 100 words. But Yang-yi finished reading it at a glance. "It's very well written." Yang-yi glanced at she's expectant little eyes from the corner of his eye, so he smiled and praised her as the little girl wished. In fact, Yang-yi still had a little objection. Because he felt that the latter part of she's content was a bit jumbled, just like the little girl usually chattered about a lot of unnecessary details. As an experiment report, such content was not necessary. However, Yang-yi hesitated for a moment and did not point it out to she. "It's almost time to teach her to write a diary." Yang-yi could see the little girl's exuberant desire to write from these 2 paragraphs. Not to mention Yang-yi's psychological activities, her father's praise made she immediately beam with satisfaction. It seemed that her efforts just now had been properly rewarded. "Check the dictionary and write down the unfamiliar words." Yang-yi stood up and returned the chair to she. He sat on the stool and said softly, "If you can't find out, ask Dad again." She had a good memory, and she still remembered that there was a word that she couldn't think of, not that she couldn't write. She didn't sit on the chair, but took her little notebook and squeezed into her father's arms, snuggled up, and pointed at it with dependence. "Papa, look at this. What did the beans grow that made them climb into the sky?" "It's bean sprouts. Jack planted peas, and they can grow bean sprouts. However, this pea has magic power, so it can grow such tall and strong bean sprouts." Yang-yi laughed. At the Communication University of Jiang City, Chow Yaoli was answering a phone call in her dormitory. Her roommates next to her were also staring nervously as they watched her make the phone call. Personally, I prefer classical music. However, because of professional reasons, I usually listen to everything, whether it's the current popular music, or the popular music of the past, or ethnic music, such as grassland songs, mountain songs, and so on. I've dabbled in all of them. Yes, I've also listened to rap, but I mostly listen to English rap music overseas. I prefer blues or folk songs. Favorite singer? I don't have a favorite pop singer at the moment. My idol is the Western soprano singer, Mr. Pavelo. I have some understanding of I am a singer. After all, I signed up, so I must have checked some of the introductions of your show beforehand. I prefer the original intention of discovering talented singers that you mentioned. I feel that the current music industry is indeed a little fickle. There are too many idol singers mixed in, and many talented singers can't stand out. I also hope to hear more outstanding singers like The Voice. Of course, other than voice, singing skills are also very important. Okay, I understand. Under the eager gaze of her roommates, Chow Yaoli ended the phone call. How was it? How was it? Did you get selected? Her roommates asked with concern. Let me wait for the news. It's similar to the previous 2 phone calls, Chow Yaoli said helplessly. Then there should be a chance. He Emin said quickly. You've already received 3 phone calls, but Xiao Lu next door only received 1. She's probably gone. Probably. She's too silly. This girl actually said that she's Murphy's fan. Chow Yaoli laughed. Fortunately, we have learned from the mistakes of others, and we've also checked other people's strategies online. Chapter 10:14. In the blink of an eye, it was the weekend again. For Shi, this coming weekend was mixed with good news and bad news. The good news was that the Blackboard bulletin that Shi and her friends had carefully prepared for 2 weeks had been completed. In fact, it had been completed on Tuesday, but they had been adding to it later. The beautiful handwriting, beautiful pictures, beautiful plate arrangement, interesting patterns, and so on. The Blackboard bulletin they made was loved by all the students in the class, and many students from other classes also came to watch it. Now, their Blackboard was ready, and they were only waiting for the evaluation organized by the school next Monday. In addition to these, there were other things that made Shi happy. For example, the bean sprouts planted by Shi had grown in the water in the glass bottle, and the other flower pots had sprouted new buds one after another. In the yard full of flowers, it was full of spring. It seemed that everything was developing in a good direction. However, there was a worrying thing that was enough to make Shi unhappy. The little girl's loosened lower incisor, after a week of development, finally began to unscrupulously reveal its ambition to break away from its owner's gums. Papa, look. On Friday night, Shi finished brushing her teeth. Before going to bed, she said unhappily. The little girl opened her small mouth and wanted her father to see. She stuck out her small tongue and pressed the bottom of her tongue against the tooth. She moved it, and the shaking tooth began to twist. That's right. It was twisting. The tooth had loosened to the point that it could rotate. Of course, the word twisting was an exaggeration. In fact, it could only twist a little. Shi did not dare to use too much strength, because if she turned her head, the root of the tooth would still be stuck in the soft flesh of the gums, and excessive movement would be very painful. Well, Papa saw it. Now that it has reached a certain level, it should be able to fall off by the weekend or early next week. We have a word to describe this situation. Melons fall when ripe. Yang Yi laughed. It means that the apple on the tree is like an apple. When it ripens to a certain extent, the stalk will naturally fall off, and the fruit will fall onto our plate. It's the same for your teeth. Lick them more often, and when they shake to a certain extent, they will naturally fall off. Although her father's story had attracted some of Shi's attention, the little girl still had her own worries. But what if I dropped it while I was sleeping? The little girl, who was wearing a little nightgown, sat cross-legged on the bed. Her eyebrows drooped as she said to her father worriedly, I'm afraid I'll eat it into my stomach. It's very scary. What if my teeth fall out and I accidentally eat it? Shi's question stumped Yang Yi. At first, Yang Yi thought that Shi's question was funny. He had never heard of anyone losing their teeth while sleeping. In some novels, it was mentioned that some tough guys would swallow their teeth after being beaten. But on second thought, Yang Yi felt that there was a possibility that one's teeth would fall off in their sleep. However, teeth wouldn't be digested by gastric juices, so eating anything was just a matter of looking around. Moreover, teeth that fell off naturally weren't sharp, so it wouldn't cause too much of an impact on the stomach. Yang Yi wasn't worried that this problem would cause serious consequences. Yang Yi thought about it carefully. After all, this was a very small possibility, so the key to his answer was to let Shi not worry too much and sleep peacefully. How could it? The teeth won't secretly fall out while you're sleeping. It's still thinking that I'm going to leave Cici, so I have to bid Cici a proper farewell, so it must let you watch it fall. Yang Yi said with a smile, Dad has prepared everything for you. When your first baby tooth falls off, we'll put it in a small bottle and treasure it. It's a memento of your growth. In order to reassure Shi, Yang Yi used a fairy tale tone and anthropomorphized the teeth. Really? The little girl looked at her father for a while and whispered in a low voice. When she saw her father nod to her firmly, she hesitated and felt relieved. On Saturday morning, Shi got up and the first thing she did was to run to the bathroom to check her teeth. Fortunately, her front teeth were still there, so she hadn't swallowed them. The little girl breathed a sigh of relief. "Papa, where's Mom?" After washing up, Shi went downstairs and saw her father in the dining room, ladling porridge into her bowl, and Tong, who was walking around holding a bottle and drinking milk. However, there seemed to be no trace of her mother, so the little girl asked curiously. Tong woke up very early every day and was very energetic. When he got up in the morning, he walked around. Today, Murphy was not at home, so Yang Yi took care of him alone. The little boy walked to the living room and then back to the kitchen like a patrol officer, as if he was patrolling to prevent his father from doing anything illegal. Mom went to the company. She has a concert next week, so she can't practice singing at home, so she has to go to the company to practice. Yang Yi raised his head and smiled at Shi. Why? Shi asked curiously as she climbed onto the chair and sat down to eat breakfast. Because when little brother sees Mom, he will pester her and ask her to play with him. Yang Yi turned to look at Tong and said with a smile. Shi also turned to look at Tong. Little Rascal found that his sister and father were both looking at him. Little Rascal seemed to have heard them talking about him, and it was about his mother. However, he did not fully understand the specific content, so at the moment, he was in a state of confusion. Looking at his innocent little eyes, she couldn't help giggling. After breakfast, she was full of energy. The little girl ran around the house with her little brother while giggling. Soon, she felt a little bored and went to find her father. "Papa, what are we going to do this morning?" Yang Yi thought for a moment and said, "How about we decorate the flower pot? For example, we can make a small flag, which is equivalent to the small tags we see when we go shopping. We can stick it in the soil and tell others what we are doing." Okay. She was interested. She knelt on the sofa and held her father's shoulders with both hands. She asked excitedly, "What are we going to do?" "First of all, let's take a piece of white paper and paste photos of carrots or cabbages on it." Yang Yi was also speaking on the spot. He said whatever came to his mind. At this moment, he thought that it was a little inappropriate to paste photos, so he pondered for a moment and said, "Wait a minute, we don't need to paste photos. Let's draw them. It looks more interesting." Yes. When it came to drawing, she was even more interested. The little girl pulled her father's arm and couldn't help but twist her little butt. She said excitedly, "Papa, I want to draw. Let me draw the big carrots." "Of course you draw them. I'll let you draw them. At most, I'll teach you how to draw them," Yang Yi said with a smile, "because these are the fruits of your labor. When the time comes, you'll have to take photos and paste them in your observation diary. In addition to the pictures, you'll have to write the name of the things you planted. For example, if this flower pot is planted with potatoes, you'll have to write potatoes on it, and then mark it with pinyin and the English name." Children at Shi's age were mainly learning pinyin. Yang Yi also made adjustments according to the actual situation. "I know, potatoes are called potatoes. Tomatoes are tomatoes." She smiled and proudly said to her father. "But do you know how to write them?" Yang Yi poured cold water on this somewhat complacent little girl and deliberately made things difficult for her. She was dumbfounded. She could speak a lot of English. She could even converse with Lu Wei Sha in Swedish. However, this was limited to the oral level. Even in the past year, she rarely read foreign language books. For these more complicated foreign language words to write, although it was not difficult to learn how to write after speaking, it was really difficult for her. Chapter 10:15. After 2 hours of hard work, she and her father finished making the small flag and inserted it into the flower pot. Then, the little girl started to work on a ruler. Her father told her that it would be very simple to insert a small flag into the flower pot. In order to make it easier to observe later, her father asked her to make a small ruler for observation. Of course, she did not want to use a ruler as a small ruler. That would be too uncreative. The tools that Yang Yi gave she were a ruler, some round wooden sticks similar to the small flag. These were leftover materials from when he gave them to she, double-sided tape, and a bag of sticky notes with 5 different colors. Obviously, the main materials were still the round wooden sticks and sticky notes. Just now, her father had told her how to use the ruler, so the little girl excitedly used it on the wooden sticks and sticky notes. Yang Yi gave the materials to she to study first. Then, he got up and went to the kitchen to peel an apple for she and Tong Tong. Eating more fruits could not only replenish the body's water, but it could also replenish various vitamins and maintain the body's nutritional balance. Of course, Tong Tong also liked to eat apple. When he heard that his father wanted to eat apple, the little boy followed behind his father and waited happily with his head raised. Yang Yi peeled the skin of 4 apples in one go. Like cutting watermelons, he cut the apple into small pieces. He also removed the seeds in the middle of the apple and filled a large glass plate, the same plate that she used to wash the green beans last time. Try it. Yang Yi turned around and was about to walk into the living room. However, while he was thinking about this, he reached out and picked up a piece of apple and was about to put it into his mouth. However, when he turned around, he saw Tong Tong standing behind him in a daze. The short little boy raised his head and looked at his father eagerly. His mouth was slightly open, as if he was waiting for the apple to fly into his mouth. However, apple probably wouldn't fly over on its own, but the little guy was already drooling. After Yang Yi looked at the little fellow's eyes, he looked at the apple in his hand that was about to be sent into his mouth. An inexplicable sense of guilt suddenly rose in his heart. Come, wash your hands quickly. I'll let you eat. Yang Yi smiled and put the apple back. He put the fruit plate aside, picked up the little guy, and let him wash his hands before handing him a piece of apple. Xiao Xiaofeng could finally eat his favorite apple contentedly. It tasted good, sweet and sour. The little guy held a piece of apple in his 2 little hands. He chewed on it while following behind his father. His narrowed eyes were filled with contentment. Back in the living room, Yang Yi saw she measuring the labels with a ruler. Other than the fact that the ruler was a little slanted, the little girl was still very focused on her task. She didn't even notice her father and brother coming over. What data have you measured? Yang Yi asked with a smile. She raised her head at this time. She excitedly put down the note, picked up the wooden stick, and measured it for her father. Papa, I measured it. This stick is 20 centimeters long. Yes, where's the note? What's its width? Yang Yi looked at she's action of matching the stick with the ruler, nodded with appreciation, and then asked. It's very difficult. I think it's more than 1 centimeter. She said with hesitation, a little bit more. How much is a little bit? Yang Yi said softly, Cici, when we study science and mathematics, there is no ambiguity in the answer. Whatever the answer is, it's what it should be. She put down the stick, picked up the note, and measured it for her father again. It's not right for you to measure it like this. When Yang Yi saw Cici tilting the ruler again, even though it wasn't by much, he put down the fruit plate on the coffee table next to him and took the ruler and note. He gestured and aligned the 2 long sides of the note with the ruler's tick marks. Look, only when these lines are aligned can we accurately measure the length between these 2 sides. You can count how many small squares there are in total. She listened to her father's explanation carefully. She also moved her head closer and pressed her chin on her father's wrist to look. 1, 2, 3, 12. Papa, there are 12 small squares. Do you think there are 10 small squares in this centimeter? Yang Yi said with a smile. She counted again and finally nodded seriously. 1 small square is equal to 0. 1 centimeters. 12 small squares are equal to 1 centimeter plus 0. 2 centimeters. But we only need 1 centimeter. What should we do if there is more? Yang Yi thought that she did not understand the numbers after the decimal point, so he did not explain too much and asked simply, "What should we do?" The little girl frowned in distress. Tong Tong ate the apple while watching his father and sister talk about something he did not understand. At this time, he finished the apple in his hand. The little guy glanced at the fruit plate on the tea table next to him, took the initiative to grab one and eat. "Papa, let's cut the extra ones. Use scissors to cut them off." She was still very smart. After she tried to understand her father's problem, she came up with an idea. "Use scissors? It's not impossible, but scissors are a little too dangerous for you. Can we think of a simpler way?" Yang Yi said with a smile. This was an open question. Yang Yi asked Shi to wash her hands, eat the apple, and then continue to think. Shi also liked to eat apple. Just now, she caught a glimpse of her brother eating apple from the corner of her eye, so she could not help but eat it. However, Shi's front teeth could not bite anything now. She could only open her mouth wide and stuff the apple into the depths of her mouth. She tried to eat the apple with her molars without touching her front teeth. Fortunately, Yang Yi took this problem into consideration and tried to cut the apple into small pieces. She did not have to eat too hard. Of course, such a big pot of apple was not just for the two little guys. Yang Yi also smiled and poked 2 pieces with toothpicks to eat. However, the scene in front of them was more interesting. When Tong Tong saw his sister intervene, he was not sure if he was afraid that his sister would finish the apple. He stared straight at his sister while stuffing the apple into his mouth faster. In particular, Tong Tong was frightened by his sister's efficiency of eating a piece of apple in one bite. He was really worried that his sister would finish the whole plate of apple before he was full. After a while, the little guy grabbed a second piece of apple and stuffed it into his mouth. However, before he could finish chewing, his face was smeared with apple paste. He was eating very hard. It seemed that if his father did not care, he would choke. Okay. Yang Yi felt that he could no longer watch the show with a smile. He stretched out his hand and tugged at Tong Tong with a smile. "Finish this first, then continue eating. There are so many apples. No one will snatch them from you. Also, if it's not enough, I'll go to the fridge to cut more for you." Tong Tong finally had time to chew the apple in his mouth. However, he still looked at the apple in his father's hand. It seemed that he still wanted to stuff it into his mouth. "I don't want to eat any more. Give it to little brother." Shi's teeth were uncomfortable, so it was difficult for her to eat the apple. This undoubtedly affected her appetite. After eating a few pieces of apple, Shi clapped her hands and ran to the kitchen to wash her hands. "Look, even your sister won't snatch it from you." Yang Yi let go of Tong Tong's hand. As expected, Tong Tong looked at his sister's back and finally let go of his obsession. Just like before, he ate slowly. However, the little guy did not have much of an appetite. After eating a few pieces of apple, Tong Tong was full and did not want to eat anymore. He wiped his little hands on his body and ran to the side to play. "Look, there's so much left. Isn't it because I have to clean up the mess? You acted as if you wanted to finish it all." Yang Yi laughed and pulled the little guy back. He wiped him with a wet tissue before letting him play with the steamed buns. Chapter 10:16. In the end, Shi still couldn't come up with a good solution to the problem of the sticky notes being too wide. Although the little girl was smart, she wasn't omnipotent. In the end, her father had to come up with an idea. Yang Yi took a pencil and demonstrated to Shi. "Look, let's measure the 1 centimeter node. Put a dot on the left and right sides, and then use a ruler to draw the 1 centimeter dividing line between the 2 dots. Then, it's very simple. Let's wrap it around the stick according to our previous considerations and stick it on the stick with double-sided tape. Then, let's cover the sticky note along the lines we drew before. Will this ensure that the size of each layer is 1 centimeter? It was simple and clear. Cici could understand it. Yes. The little girl nodded happily. That's right. Papa, you're so awesome. How could he come up with such a wonderful idea? Yang Yi had already demonstrated once. Next, it was time for Shi to do it herself. She drew lines on the sticky notes one by one and wrapped them around the stick one by one. In fact, this was a very boring manual job. Tong Tong came over to take a look at the beginning, but soon he felt bored and turned around to continue playing the game of throwing and catching the ball with steamed bun. However, to Yang Yi's relief, Shi finished her work very seriously. Although it took more than an hour, Shi was not sloppy at all. She didn't complain about being tired or bitter. Moreover, the clever and skillful little girl had made the 3 small gauges accurately and beautifully. In particular, each sticky note matched the lines drawn. It could almost be described as perfect. Papa didn't need to say anything. She also stuck the sticky notes of different colors on the stick according to the order of the sticky notes. Each stick was 10 centimeters long. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, red, orange, yellow, green, and blue. Every stick was the same. Each stick was 1 centimeter long, and every stick was perfectly symmetrical. When Yang Yi checked, he felt comfortable just looking at it. Well done. Come, put them in the flower pot so that you can take pictures. This is your hard work. Yang Yi smiled and took out his camera, waving it in front of Shi. After inserting the small ruler, the little girl ran over energetically and took the camera. She happily said to her father, "Papa, I want to show it to Xiner. She may want to make such a beautiful flower pot like me." That might not be the case, Yang Yi thought to himself. He remembered that Lan Hao Kai had complained to him yesterday that Lan Xin was not as diligent as Shi. After she came home, she was like a little ancestor, holding a chicken claw rake while instructing him to cut and plant the potatoes. I'm not going to talk about picking the simplest ones. But later, she forgot to water the plants. She kept pestering Grandma Wu to help her while she slacked off, saying that she didn't want to dirty her hands. She didn't go over to take a look at the plants for a few days. What's the point of doing observation homework? She would probably tell Lan Xin about this, and the chubby little girl would run over to take a look and ask Shi if she had any more. If she didn't help her make a small ruler, there would be no more results. Of course, Yang Yi didn't say that. He smiled and said, "Okay, you can teach Xiner how to make it, but don't help her slack off. You must let her make her own small flag and small ruler." Guazian excitedly came back from outside with a box in her arms. Just as she passed by the living room, she was stopped by her mother. Yen, what are you holding in your hand?" Tan Huizhen didn't care if Guazian went out to play on weekends, as long as she didn't go too crazy and came home on time. But now, Tan Huizhen saw her go into her room as soon as she came in. She couldn't help but frown and ask suspiciously, "Oh, this?" Guazian stopped in her tracks and didn't try to hide it. She carried it to the coffee table and opened it for Tan Huizhen to see. "This is my brother's support sign. There's also a light stick and a plastic palm. It really wasn't a taboo item. It wasn't a web novel or shoujo manga that her family didn't let her read because of her studies." Guazian said confidently, "Sister Ding Xiang gave these to me. Next Saturday night, isn't Sister Murphy holding a concert in Jiangqing? My brother will also sing a song on stage, so I asked Sister Ding Xiang to prepare these for me. I'll bring them to the concert." Tan Huizhen knew about this. But although she wasn't suspicious anymore, she still kept a straight face and lectured her daughter seriously. "Don't always trouble your sister Ding Xiang. She's your brother's assistant, not yours. Also, it's not easy for her to earn money, and you still want to ask her for things. How can you ask for it?" Actually, Tan Huizhen just wanted to find an excuse to lecture Guazian, but she didn't expect her to be so aggressive. Maybe it was because Ding Xiang had left a good impression on her, especially before the new year, when she treated Ding Xiang to a meal at home. Ding Xiang even helped to wash the dishes. Plus, because she pitted Ding Xiang's background, Tan Huizhen suddenly sided with Ding Xiang in front of her daughter. "I didn't ask Sister Ding Xiang to buy these for me. Their company already prepared them. Otherwise, do you think those support cards at concerts and singing shows are all made by fans? Maybe some are like my brother, and the company is worried that no one will pay attention to them because they're not famous enough, so they spent money to get people to support them. I just asked Sister Ding Xiang to buy some for me, and I'll support my brother for free, Guozian said with a smile, and conveniently slandered Guozi. But as she spoke, Guozian rolled her eyes and suggested, "Mom, do you have any plans for next Saturday night?" Tan Huizhen frowned slightly and asked, "What do you want to do?" "Hee, I think that since you don't have anything on the weekend, why don't you come with me to watch Sister Murphy's concert? Think about it, I'm only in high school, and it's dangerous for a girl to go to a concert alone." "Mom, can you come with me?" Guozian held her mother's arm and said coquettishly. "I'm already so old, why would I go to a concert?" Not going. Let your brother come back with you." Tan Huizhen subconsciously refused. "Mom, how are you old? Look at your hair, it's still black and beautiful. If you go out with me, people will say that we're sisters." Guozian said sweetly, "Moreover, it's Guozi's first time singing on such a big stage, don't you want to go and take a look?" This really moved Tan Huizhen. She hesitated for a moment and said, "It's already so late, where are the tickets?" "Yes, I guarantee that there are tickets. Others might not have tickets, but how can my brother not get tickets for you?" "I'll get them for you right away." Guozian laughed and patted her chest. Chapter 1017. Yang Yi had the habit of displaying some of Shi's small works on micro-broadcasting from time to time. As soon as the little girl completed the beautification of her planting assignment, Yang Yi picked 2 photos without Shi's face and posted them online. Just like before, many netizens expressed their complaints. "Why don't you post Shi's beautiful appearance? I haven't seen a beautiful girl in a long time. Father-in-law, you've changed. Our Shi is amazing. She can even play tricks on the farm." However, it was worth mentioning that in addition to these daily complaints and praises, there were also some sarcastic comments under Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting. "Hee, you're already a billionaire, and you still want a farm? Who are you trying to show off your bitterness and sweetness? Can't you show some social responsibility? Such a rich person, but he doesn't do anything serious under micro-broadcasting. Can't he spread some positive energy? Do you want to uphold justice for social injustice? Since you're already a rich person, there's no need for you to stay in the entertainment industry, right? Look at you, you don't do anything serious every day. Quit the entertainment industry and leave the opportunity to others." This was a typical extreme hatred of the rich. After all, not everyone in this society could have a normal mentality. Especially on the internet, keyboard warriors would hide behind the internet and actively show their presence. Sometimes, these sour grapes would be magnified. However, there was no need to pay attention to it. Yang Yi's wealth was suddenly exposed and he became the richest star in the entertainment industry. Naturally, some people couldn't stand it. Of course, these comments only caused some dissatisfied counterattacks from Yang Yi's fans. Yang Yi himself was indifferent. Ever since he was called father-in-law, he almost never looked at the comments. After 3 phone calls, Chao Yaoli and He Imin received an advance notice on Sunday. They had to gather at Jiangnan TV station on Tuesday to participate in the recording of the first episode of the program. The 2 of them were very lucky to be arranged to be in the same episode. Chao Yaoli and He Imin were so excited that they almost screamed. He Imin read the message and read out some key requirements. You have to pay for your own travel and accommodation expenses. The TV station will arrange a dinner for the public judges. You have to go to the Zhongqing TV station's fan building on Tuesday before 5 p.m. with your ID card to get your number tag, ticket, meal voucher. These should be mainly for the public judges from other places, right? Chao Yaoli said with some surprise, "We live in Zhongqing, so we don't need much money for transportation or hotels. However, why would people from other places come all the way to Zhongqing without any subsidies just to watch a show?" Hee-min laughed. I think so. There are still a lot of rich people in this world. In order to see celebrities up close, they will do anything. They quickly replied to the message to confirm that they could be there. They were afraid that they would be disqualified if they were too slow. Murphy was going to go all out next week. As Murphy was a person who either did nothing or did her best, she would not allow herself to perform badly on stage. Therefore, this weekend, Murphy was also busy preparing for the show. Every day, she would go to the company early to practice singing. Yang Yi could also bring the two children to the company. After all, it was his territory, so he could do whatever he wanted. In the past, Yang Yi had done this many times. When Murphy was recording her first album, he was at the company playing music with Murphy, while she stayed outside to help take care of her younger brother. However, it was different now. Tong Tong's ability to move was not what it used to be. He was full of energy, unlike before, when he could only stay in one place obediently. If there was nothing to play with and no parents to accompany him, she would not be able to handle it. Of course, the weather was good these days. The spring sun was bright and beautiful, so playing outdoors might be a good choice. However, Yang Yi considered that he had been in the limelight recently. All the reporters in the entertainment industry seemed to be searching for him. They wanted to get some news that could attract the attention of the audience. Therefore, it was better for him not to bring the children out for the time being. It was not safe. Since they were playing at home, Yang Yi racked his brains to think of something that could be fun for the two children. It would be best if she and Tong Tong could participate in it enthusiastically. Otherwise, like yesterday, when she was engrossed in making flags and measuring sticks, Tong Tong could only watch from the side. He always felt that he was being neglected by his sister. Fortunately, Yang Yi had many novel ideas in his mind. He called she and Tong Tong over and announced, "We are going to play a game together." Tong Tong put his hands behind his back. However, he was restless. He leaned against the wall and stuck his little butt out. Then, he looked at his father and smiled happily. No one knew what he was happy about. "Okay. Papa, what game are we going to play?" She was more supportive. She happily jumped on the side and said excitedly. The little girl's nasal voice was a little thick recently. It was mainly because she could not help but use her tongue to tease her loosened front tooth. "Our game is called Passing Through the Infrared Protective Array." Yang Yi gave the game he thought of an image but not very domineering name. However, she and Tong Tong did not understand. The two little guys could only look at their father in surprise. Wow, so mysterious. Yang Yi said with assurance. From movies and TV shows, we can see that most of the time, treasures are hidden in places with many traps. If we want to get the treasures, we have to pass through these traps. One of the traps uses infrared rays to set up an area that is difficult to pass through. As long as your body comes into contact with the infrared rays, it will trigger the alarm. Of course, Tong Tong and she did not understand what their father was talking about. Fortunately, their father quickly showed them the game with real objects. In fact, he was setting up the game room. Under the curious gaze of she and Tong Tong, Yang Yi took out a ball of red paper and started to glue the long strips of paper together on the aisle next to the stairs on the first floor. The long strips of paper were like spider silk. These long strips of paper were placed between the two walls in a disorderly manner. "I got it. This is like the connecting questions in my exams." She looked at it for a while and her eyes lit up. She said excitedly to her father, "Wasn't it?" These strips of paper were of different heights. Some of them were horizontal, some crossed, and some were slanted. From one end of the aisle, it really did look like the connecting questions in she's exams. However, it had a very long depth. The way to play this game is that you have to pass through these strips of paper, but you can't break them. Yang Yi smiled and personally demonstrated to she and Tong Tong. Although Yang Yi was tall and burly, he was very agile. He bent his waist, raised his leg, sucked in his stomach, lowered his head, stretched his hand, and twisted his body nimbly between the strips of paper like a flexible python. She screamed nervously for a while and then cheered for her father in surprise. Papa is so awesome. I didn't even touch it. When she saw her father easily pass through the strips of paper, she excitedly ran up and hugged her father's hand. She raised her head and said with admiration, "Of course, didn't you see that your father used to cough? Your father used to practice kung fu." Yang Yi was so proud that he almost spilled the beans. Fortunately, he stopped himself and then changed his words with a smile. After Cici finished reading, she also understood how her father had set up this paper ribbon array. The little girl's face was filled with eagerness. She also wanted to be like her father and get in and out of the paper ribbon array very quickly. Chapter 10:18. After Yang Yi finished his explanation, he saw that she was eager to try. He smiled and raised his right hand, saying, "Okay, who wants to be the first to try?" Me. She was very excited. She raised her small arm high and kept moving forward, as if she was worried that her brother would steal the first place from her. However, Tong Tong did not have such thoughts. He was still thinking about life. Perhaps the red maze set up by his father confused him a little, or perhaps he was just trying hard to understand his father and sister's intentions and wanted to know what they were playing at. Since she was so enthusiastic, Yang Yi happily called out names and let she be the first to try the infrared maze. "Sister, you go first. Brother, you go later. But remember, don't touch the paper towels. If you break them, you will fail. You will have to leave and start from the beginning again." Yang Yi waved his hand and retreated to the position next to Tong Tong to watch she's performance. When Tong Tong saw his father standing next to him, he excitedly reached out and grabbed his father's trousers. However, his attention was quickly attracted by his sister. What was his sister doing? Under the gaze of her father and brother, she concentrated on the paper towels in front of her. She followed her father's example and carefully raised her foot to cross the first threshold. Yang Yi's array was very particular. The distance between the first two towels was relatively large, which was easy to pass and also made it more convenient for Cici and the others to explore. However, the further they went, the smaller the distance between the two towels, and the more difficult it would be. The problems that the challengers would have to face gradually increased. Therefore, when she crossed the first threshold and looked back happily, wanting to be praised by her father, Yang Yi only smiled and gave her a thumbs up, encouraging her to continue. The second threshold was a paper towel line that was 1/2 meter high. For someone of she's height, she had to bend over, so she squatted down and crawled over. "Oh, this is fun." Tong Tong looked at his sister crawling around, and his big round eyes shone with longing. She didn't manage to complete the challenge. When she encountered the 5th paper towel, she sidestepped it. She didn't expect that she would be so tall that her 2 braids scraped across the paper towel belt, breaking the already fragile paper towel belt. She felt it herself. The paper towel broke and fell in front of her eyes. She cried out in frustration. This was considered a failure. The loser had to leave the paper towel for others to play with. Cici hadn't had enough fun yet, so she couldn't bear to come out. She stayed in the line formation, turned her little head, and looked at her father eagerly. Her pitiful little eyes seemed to be begging for a chance to be exempted. "Come on out, it's your brother's turn." Yang Yi strictly played according to the rules. He smiled and waved at Shi. "Don't worry, your brother might lose faster than you. It'll be your turn soon." It was easy to go in, but difficult to come out. Moreover, she was still holding the paper towel that she broke earlier. The little girl dawdled for a while before slowly coming out. Fortunately, Tong Tong did not rush her. The little boy could not control himself and grinned. If his father had not held his hand, he would have crawled in long ago. "You're the same as your sister. See how far you can go, okay? If you touch the paper towel, you have to come out." Yang Yi squatted down and held the little boy's hand to give him some impromptu training. However, looking at him, Yang Yi did not seem to be listening. When his sister came out, Yang Yi let go of his hand and patted his little butt. He smiled and said, "Go, our little agent brother." Cece handed the broken tissue to her father and leaned into her father's arms. Leaning against her father's broad shoulders, she giggled and said, "Little brother, I'm a secret agent, but I'm different from my little brother. I'm the same as my father. I'm a Special Forces sister, not an agent sister." The little girl knew that her father used to be a Special Forces soldier. Moreover, she had seen Uncle Gung Sha's Soldier's Assault, and knew that Special Forces soldiers were super powerful. Therefore, she had a blind admiration for Special Forces soldiers because of her father. "Okay, you're a Special Forces sister, and he's an agent brother." Yang Yi smiled and said, "This was just talk." Now that he had such a rich family, it was impossible for him to raise his child in such a dangerous direction. However, Tong Tong's performance in front of him had also cut off this possibility. The little boy smiled foolishly and ran forward. Just as his sister and father were giving him a nickname, the little boy had bravely passed 3 levels. Except for the second level, which was slightly higher and did not affect the little boy, Tong Tong directly knocked the first and third levels away with his head. However, the red paper towels wrapped around his head and neck, making the little boy look like a mummy. This feeling was not good. When Yang Yi went over to pull him out, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. The little boy was standing in the same place, his 2 little hands fiddling with the long and annoying paper towels that were like spider silk. "Ha ha!" She giggled at the side. The little girl was laughing so hard that she was convulsing. "My brother is too stupid. How could he break these things directly? He lost just like that." Sure enough, her father was right. She did not have to wait too long for her brother to get himself out of the game. Yang Yi was infected by Shi's laughter. He also laughed as he helped Tong Tong remove the paper towels that he could not get rid of. He casually put them aside and then explained to him, "You can't touch these obstacles. You have to avoid them, right?" After being tangled in the paper towels once, Tong Tong knew that they were annoying. He turned to look at his father and watched as his father talked to him seriously. Of course, he still did not understand what his father was saying. However, the little boy understood the key words don't, should, and right. Therefore, when Tong Tong saw his father explain while pulling a new paper towel over and asking his sister to show him how to get through it, he roughly understood how to play the game. "This." Tong Tong looked at his father and said in a childish voice as he pointed at the line. She thought that Tong Tong wanted to be first, so she quickly raised her voice and said anxiously to her father, "I was here first. It's my turn. Wait a minute. Dad has to fix it. Look, you and your sister have broken these obstacles." Yang Yi smiled and took a new paper towel to fix it. After he was done, he waved his hand and said, "Sister will go first. Little brother, you have to observe and learn from your sister. Watch how she plays." Little Tianyuan was held in his father's arms, and he could only watch helplessly as his sister entered the infrared array with a joyful laugh. After watching for a while, he could not help but struggle a little in his father's arms. "Papa, I want to play." Tong Tong could not break free, so he could only point in his sister's direction and pout his little mouth as he spoke eagerly. He said this sentence very fluently. It seemed that he found it very interesting to watch his sister play and could not hold it in any longer. Yang Yi thought for a while. The width of the tunnel was not small. It was originally designed to be used to park bicycles, but for the sake of smoothness and aesthetics, he left it empty. Actually, the tunnel was still big enough for the 2 little guys, and they would not be in the same place. The older sister would definitely climb faster than the younger brother. If the 2 children played together, it would be more interesting to compete with each other. Therefore, Yang Yi pulled Tong Tong, who was jumping around anxiously, and said with a smile, "Dad can let you play, but you can't touch these paper towels." Yang Yi picked up a piece of paper towel that had been torn by Tong Tong, pulled it in front of him, and broke it with his head to demonstrate. Then, he waved his hand and said, "You can't. Do you understand?" Tong Tong could still understand his father's meaning. He blinked his big round eyes, nodded, and muttered softly, "I want to play." "I can't." "Okay." Yang Yi smiled, let go of the little guy's hand, and pointed to the line to let him pass. At the same time, Yang Yi reminded Shi in a loud voice, Shi, you have to pass the level quickly. Your brother is coming. She was still passing the level slowly. In order not to make any mistakes, she was like a little turtle, moving very slowly. At this moment, hearing her father's words, she turned her head and saw her brother grinning. He ran to the first line and lifted his leg shakily. In order not to fall, the little guy even bent down. Tong learned from his sister, and he did it very well. Oh, Papa, why did you let my brother come in? I haven't lost yet. He can't be so fast, Cici shouted, unwilling to comply. However, her nervousness forced her to only stomp her feet and chuckle as she continued to explore forward with all her might. Let's see if your brother is faster or you are faster. Sister, you have to work harder. Yang Yi deliberately teased Shi. No, I'm faster. Shi did not turn her head, but her clear voice came back. The sound of the family's happy laughter echoed in the stairwell. However, Yang Yi did not know that he had caused an unexpected result by letting the two children go in together. Chapter 1019. Now, this is a live report from Mr. Papa, the reporter at the front. Sister Special Forces has taken advantage of her early departure and is leading by a wide margin. However, our little special agent brother is not willing to be left behind and is trying his best to catch up. Originally, Yang Yi was just watching from the back with a smile, but when he was bored and casually used the tone of a sports commentator to describe the situation on the scene, he found it interesting, so he couldn't help but start to play. At this moment, Yang Yi had already walked to the stairs and was leaning against the railing. He looked down at Shi and Tong's little heads and explained with a smile, Okay, our little Special Forces sister has encountered a small problem. She has encountered an advanced checkpoint with 2 infrared rays in front of her. How is she going to face this challenge? It seems like this checkpoint can only be passed slowly from the middle, but it's very troublesome because if you stick your little bit up, you might break the infrared ray. She was originally frowning and thinking of a solution, but when she heard her father's words, she couldn't help but raise her little head and look at her father with a smile. Yang Yi turned to look at Tong and exclaimed softly as if he had discovered a new continent, Oh, little Special Forces sister, you really can't let your guard down. We can see that little secret agent brother is already rushing over to this place at a very fast speed. Yang Yi wasn't exaggerating on purpose. Tong's performance really surprised Yang Yi. Just now, when he didn't pay attention to him, the little guy actually found the way by himself. Just like before, he directly crawled on the ground. As long as he didn't raise his head too high and didn't deliberately crawl to the corners, he wouldn't touch the paper ribbons. When Yang Yi saw this, he couldn't help but open his mouth. He secretly blamed himself in his heart. I was careless. Why did they stick so high up? Why did they leave such a big hole at the bottom? Tong's little brain is quite flexible. When he saw that this was feasible and wouldn't touch those annoying paper ribbons, he grinned happily and crawled forward with all his might. When it comes to crawling, I, Yang Xiaosu, am not afraid of anyone. No, in just a few seconds, Tong had almost caught up with Shi. When she heard her father's voice, she turned her head and noticed the situation. As soon as she saw it, she pouted her little mouth in dissatisfaction and complained to her father, Papa, little brother is cheating. He can't crawl on the ground. It's not that it's impossible. It's just that there's a loophole in Dad's design. It's possible to use the rules reasonably. Yang Yi pondered for a moment and replied, You can also crawl over. Later, Papa will stick the paper tape lower so that Momo can't crawl over in the future. At least this round is possible. You have to learn from your brother and use your wisdom to face difficulties. Hey, hee. Tong crawled to his sister's side. He didn't forget to raise his head and smile at his sister before he continued to crawl forward energetically. I want to climb too. I can climb faster than my little brother. Shi's desire to win was aroused. The little girl pouted her little mouth and angrily crawled up from the ground. Okay, the little Special Forces sister has adopted the same strategy as your little brother. Can she surpass your little brother in crawling? Be careful not to raise your head too high. Otherwise, you'll touch the paper tape. Yang Yi smiled as he explained and gave pointers. This game of crossing the infrared array became the Special Forces training of crawling over barbed wire. However, Shi's speed was still faster. After all, she was the older sister. Soon, she gained a little lead. However, in front of the next obstacle, Shi found that she couldn't crawl over. This was because the paper tape at the bottom of the obstacle was in a diagonal position. The paper tape near she happened to block half of the space, so Tong Tong could easily crawl over. Seeing that her little brother was about to crawl over, Shi anxiously reached out and pulled Tong Tong's shoulder. Don't fight. Friendship comes first. Yang Yi saw this scene and hurriedly reminded Shi. I can't go over. She turned her little head and looked at her father in distress. It's not difficult. Stand up carefully. With your advantage of long legs, you'll be able to cross over. Yang Yi smiled as he reminded Shi. Sometimes, there's more than one shortcut. You have to be flexible and choose the one that suits you best. Cici was suddenly enlightened. She got up and looked at the two paper ribbons that only reached up to her butt. She stood on her tiptoes and lifted her slender calf. Then, she jumped over them easily. For a girl who often danced, had a slender figure, flexibility, and good jumping ability, this wasn't a big obstacle. After this obstacle, she could continue crawling. She finally made use of her advantage of being bigger and faster than Tong Tong. She giggled and was about to overtake Tong Tong and climb to the front. However, when his sister grabbed his shoulder, it gave Tong Tong a bad example. Tong Tong was trying his best to crawl. When he saw that his sister was about to overtake him, he anxiously reached out to grab her. Just in time, Tong Tong's chubby little hand landed on Shi's mouth with a smack. She frowned. She closed her eyes and covered her mouth with her two little hands. She couldn't help but groan. She didn't care if she touched the paper tapes. She crawled up from the ground and buried her head between her knees. Her expression was unreadable. This scene happened too suddenly. Yang Yi was looking down from above, so he couldn't see clearly. He thought that Tong Tong had poked Shi in the eye. He jumped down the stairs in a panic and jumped to Shi's side. He didn't care if his burly body crushed a large number of paper tapes. Shi, how are you feeling? Did you get poked in the eye or somewhere else? Let Daddy have a look. Yang Yi was so anxious that he didn't have time to scold Tong Tong. He quickly squatted down and gently patted Shi's shoulder as he asked softly, "Woo woo." Shi covered her mouth. Although she was frowning, she was still calm for the time being. Perhaps she herself was a little confused. She raised her head and looked at her father pitifully with her big watery eyes. Unfortunately, she was covering her mouth, so Yang Yi couldn't hear what she was saying. "Where did my brother's hand poke you? Does it hurt?" Yang Yi reached out and gently hugged the little girl, who looked a little helpless and on the verge of tears, in his arms and asked with heartache. Tong Tong didn't play this time. He seemed to feel that the atmosphere was not right. Although Daddy didn't scold him, all the turbulence seemed to be caused by the slap he had put on his sister's mouth. The little boy realized that something was wrong. He slowly got up from the ground, hesitantly approached Daddy, and carefully lay on Daddy's back. "Daddy, don't scold me. I'm also a poor little boy." However, Yang Yi didn't have time to pay attention to Tong Tong at this time. He was looking at Shi nervously. When he saw that Shi's eyes were fine, her nose and face were white and tender, and there was no obvious red stain, he felt a little relieved. However, before he could breathe a sigh of relief, he saw Shi frowning and coughing. She spat out a small tooth with a little bit of blood at the end of it. Seeing this scene, Yang Yi was stunned for a moment, while Cici, who was originally calm, was suddenly frightened by the bloody teeth. With a cry, she closed her eyes and cried in her father's arms. Chapter 1020. Actually, it wasn't that painful, because Cece's teeth had been shaken to the point where they were about to fall out. Otherwise, little Momo wouldn't have slapped her. With his little strength, he was actually able to make his sister's teeth fall out. Moreover, Tong Tong's slap was very mysterious. It conveniently solved the problem that had been troubling Shi for more than a week. However, let alone Shi, anyone who saw a bloody tooth would be shocked, let alone a 6-year-old girl. Yang Yi thought that Shi was crying because of the pain, so he hurriedly grabbed the tooth that Shi stuffed into his hand with his left hand and placed it behind Shi's waist. He hugged his sister-in-law who was burying her head in his arms and gently stroked her soft hair with his right hand. He comforted her gently. "It's okay, don't cry. It's all your brother's fault. How could he be so uncivilized and hit you? Daddy will help you scold him, so don't be sad. The tooth just fell out. Let Daddy take a look at it and see how it is, okay?" Yang Yi was a little worried that there might be a broken tooth inside. However, looking at the size of the tooth in his hand, it shouldn't be a big problem. Shi was so sad that she sobbed in her father's arms and refused to raise her head. This made Yang Yi's heart ache, and he even nagged at Tong Tong for a while. What he said was similar. He was just comforting Shi. Yang Yi's back was facing Tong Tong. He didn't really want to punish Tong Tong. There was no right or wrong in this matter. After all, Shi was the one who pulled Tong Tong and started the fight. If Shi wasn't so sad, Yang Yi would have to deal with this matter. At this time, he would have to teach the two little rascals a lesson. That's right, he would punish them both. They were family. How could he hit them? However, Yang Yi was a little careless. Although Tong Tong was usually muddle-headed, he could understand a lot of words. He could even feel the adult's tone and attitude. Tong Tong, who was hugging his father's broad back, couldn't help but tear up when he heard his sister's cries. It was as if his sister's cries resonated with him. At this time, when he heard his father say, "It's all your brother's fault," he didn't know why, but he felt sad. Wah! Little Swan and I couldn't help but cry along with her sister. They were crying to each other's to cry. Yang Yi had no choice but to carry Tong Tong over. With Shi in his left hand and Tong Tong in his right, he coaxed them left and right. The two little rascals' cries almost broke his eardrums. Shi couldn't help crying for a while. She was no longer in the mood to cry because of her brother's cries. She raised her little face and glanced at her brother, who was also wiping his tears on his father's clothes. She pursed her little mouth and asked with grievance, "Papa, why is my brother crying too?" Yang Yi helplessly said to Shi, maybe he realized his mistake. "He's feeling guilty for accidentally knocking out my sister's tooth just now." She was stunned when she heard this. She looked at her father in a daze. Yang Yi also felt tired. In order to not let his sister bear any grudges against his brother, he had to make up some white lies to coax her. Fortunately, Shi didn't cry anymore. The shock had also passed. Yang Yi coaxed Tong Tong and made him a bottle of milk. He let him drink it in the car. Then, he took the siblings to the dentist's office that they went to before. Although he didn't care much about this small injury, he still cared about his children. Since Shi's tooth was knocked out, Yang Yi had to get a professional to check it out. He wanted to make sure that the little girl didn't have any remaining teeth, which would affect the growth of her new teeth. He also wanted to make sure that Shi's other teeth were fine. "Let's go. Did you turn off the light in your bedroom?" Yang Yi asked as he beckoned Shi to get into the car. He didn't notice that behind him, Xiao Guai's chubby body was squeezing through the dog hole in the door and squeezing into the living room. Steamed Bun was also following behind him and lining up to enter. Since something like this had happened, Yang Yi naturally had to let Murphy know. She heard that Shi's tooth was about to fall out because Tong Tong accidentally knocked it out. Although Yang Yi told her that it wasn't a big problem, Murphy was busy practicing her song, so how could she relax? She hurriedly packed up and asked the company's driver to take her back. The company wasn't far from home. After all, Yang Yi had chosen Ting Shan as the location. When Murphy arrived at the dentist's office, she had just been checked. Yang Yi was holding Tong Tong in his left hand and holding Shi Shi in his right hand as he walked out of the dentist's office through the glass doors. "How is it? Is Shi Shi okay?" Murphy asked Yang Yi anxiously as she squatted down and held Shi Shi's little hand. Her heart ached as she said, "Let mommy see where little brother hit." "Mom." When Tong Tong saw his mother, he immediately released his hands from his father's neck and reached out his little hands for his mother to carry him. Yang Yi smiled and said, "They didn't hit her. They were in the middle of a competition and were pulling and pulling each other. I was about to tell them not to touch each other when little brother accidentally hit his sister's mouth. Coincidentally, Shi Shi's tooth was loose, so it fell out." Murphy asked Shi Shi to open her mouth to check and asked the little girl, "Does it hurt?" Shi Shi looked at her mother, shook her head, and said softly, "It doesn't hurt anymore." Murphy was finally relieved. She stood up and carried Tong Tong, who was about to throw a tantrum. When Tong Tong returned to the arms of his mom, who loved him the most, his eyes were red and he was about to cry. He pursed his lips as if to say, "Mom, you don't know what I went through today." Okay. Murphy and Yang Yi looked at each other and comforted the little guy. How could she not know Tong Tong's current state of mind? Yang Yi then held Shi Shi's little hand and walked side by side with Murphy, who was carrying Tong Tong, to his car. Murphy was in the nanny van, so naturally, the driver drove back. "Actually, I don't think it's a bad thing," Yang Yi said to Murphy with a smile. He deliberately used a relaxed tone to liven up the atmosphere. Otherwise, Shi was still immersed in the panic of losing her tooth. The tooth fell out suddenly, so Shi didn't react in time. That's why she didn't feel much pain. She felt pain. Shi felt that her father's words were not right. She pouted and refuted, "When little brother hit me, it was very painful. It's still a little painful now. But it's better than it hanging there. When the time comes, you'll have to take it off yourself, right?" Yang Yi said with a smile, "You have to take it off slowly. It'll be painful, but it'll take a long time. We all say that it's better to have a short pain than a long pain. That's the truth. It'll be better if it hurts all of a sudden. How comfortable it is." "That's right. It'll be more painful to pull out your own tooth, and it'll be very torturous. You haven't eaten for several days. When you go back tonight, you have to eat well. You don't have to worry about hurting your tooth." Murphy also said with a smile, "I think Dad is right. You've profited from a disaster." She tilted her head and thought carefully. It seemed to be the case. The little girl realized that she finally didn't have to be bothered by this small moving incisor. Okay. When she got into the car, she finally smiled sweetly and said to her father, "Then Papa, I want to eat something delicious today. What are you going to make for me?" "It doesn't matter. Let's go eat a big meal now. At this time, we won't be able to go home to cook. Let's go eat soup dumplings that you haven't eaten in a long time, okay? There's a very rich and sweet soup and delicious dumpling fillings," Yang Yi suggested. "Hey, that's good. I've been to Shanghai a few times recently, but I haven't eaten soup dumplings." Murphy also clapped her hands and said with a smile, Okay. I want to eat soup dumplings." She nodded happily and beamed at her parents. She, who was in a good mood, didn't seem to realize that there was something wrong with her. Chapter 10:21. "Papa, I can lick the outside of my teeth now. My tongue licks my teeth like this, and then a little bit of my tongue runs out. At around noon, Yang Yi's Humvee stopped at the garage. After getting out of the car, the girls' bell-like laughter could be heard from afar. After lunch, Shi's mood had returned to its previous brilliance, especially without the burden of her loose front teeth. She smiled even more heartily. "Have you ever had soup run out from between your teeth when you were eating soup dumplings?" Yang Yi asked with a smile as he closed the car door. "No. I just felt that it was a little hot, and then the soup I drank went into my stomach." After Cece finished speaking, there was another string of pleasant laughter. Yang Yi took the lead and led Murphy and the others into the house. Tong Tong was very sleepy now. He was lying in his mother's arms in a daze. Murphy smiled and listened to Yang Yi and Shi talk. She did not speak, as she was afraid of disturbing the little girl. However, just as they opened the door, Yang Yi gritted his teeth and growled, "Steamed bun." The scene in front of him almost made Yang Yi explode. It wasn't just the red paper towels that were fluttering around the door. Yang Yi looked around and saw that the carpet in the living room, the entrance to the kitchen, and the corridor in the bathroom were scattered with paper towel shreds everywhere. When Yang Yi and the others opened the door and came back, Steamed Bun was still stepping on a pile of paper towels and wagging his tail happily at them. When Murphy saw this, she was angry and amused. She did not have such a big reaction, so she asked with a smile, "When you took Shi and the others out, didn't you take the paper towels with you?" Of course, Tong Tong was going to sleep, so Murphy asked and carried the little girl upstairs. However, when she went upstairs, she could not help but smile and poke her head down to say, "There are still some paper towels in the corridor upstairs, but not a lot." Yang Yi shook his head helplessly. He really didn't pack up properly. At that time, he was in a hurry to take Cece to the dentist. Not to mention the broken tissue paper, even the tissue paper array he set up was still placed in the stairway. Presumably, Bao Bao took advantage of the time he wasn't at home to wreak havoc in the heavenly palace. "Steamed Bun, come here." Yang Yi gritted his teeth and pointed at Steamed Bun. She did not understand. She looked at the mess in front of her and asked in surprise after a while, "Papa, is all this made by Steamed Bun?" "Just look at it and you'll know." Yang Yi pointed at the steamed bun and snickered. At this moment, Steamed Bun also felt his master's anger. He seemed to understand something and woke up from his happy state of playing with the tissues. He lay on the ground and didn't dare to look directly at Yang Yi. His head was on the other side of his body. Sure enough, he was scared. "Do you know what you did was wrong? You scattered the paper towels everywhere. How do you want me to clean up?" Yang Yi patted the floor next to Steamed Bun and scolded, "You are usually the most obedient one, but why are you even more naughty than Xiao Guai today?" If Steamed Bun could understand human language, he would feel wronged. What did he mean by naughty than Xiao Guai? He was just a dog. How could he make such a big scene? Xiao Guai, Xiao Hui, and Du, the three clever ghosts, heard that their masters were coming back and ran away early, leaving Steamed Bun to take the blame alone. Unfortunately, Steamed Bun did not understand and did not know how to explain. He could only lower his head, extend a paw, and press Yang Yi's hand on the floor. Half an hour later, Shi went upstairs to sleep. Yang Yi was holding a broom. He had just finished sweeping the confetti in the corridor on the second floor. He glanced at Bao Bao, who was locked up in a cage and placed in the stairwell. He said in both anger and amusement, "Continue to reflect there. Come out when you know what you did was wrong." He really had to teach this little guy a lesson. Otherwise, he would tear the paper towels today, and tomorrow he would tear the tiles off the roof. In the afternoon, Yang Yi took Shi to the mall and picked her favorite diary. From next week onwards, Shi would start learning how to write a diary. However, it seemed that writing a diary was a very difficult and annoying thing for other children, but for Cece, who had a lot of new things and a lot of things to say every day, it was an interesting thing that she was willing to try. Pick one thing that you think is the most interesting and write it down. When you look back at it in the future, you will find it very interesting. It will be like you are telling a story to yourself. That was what her father said. Of course, Shi also liked to write a diary. This was just transferring some of the content that she had originally written in the daily observation to her favorite diary. This way, it would be more interesting. Therefore, when she came back, Shi couldn't wait to run to her desk in the living room. She opened her diary and smiled happily, preparing to write today's diary. Although it was a little early, Shi felt that there were a lot of things that had happened today, and there was already a lot of material to choose from. Just like when she was writing the daily observation, Shi wrote the date, Sunday, and the weather at the beginning. Then, She pondered for a moment and started writing. Today, I played with my father and brother. I was very happy. I was much faster than my brother. Little brother Schwalai hit me and knocked out my teeth. I'm so scared. My father said not to be angry with my brother. He wouldn't play with me. It was okay if my teeth were knocked out. It wasn't very bad. My father said that if he were to knock his teeth out, he would be very bad. It was my brother who told me not to be bad. As Cece wrote on her own, she couldn't help but smile with her eyebrows slightly curved. Do you want to have sex with your brother? All right, don't be angry with your brother. He's still so young. He doesn't even know how to speak yet. My brother even cried. My father said that my brother was also bad. In fact, Cece's diary today was filled with this incident. After all, this incident had left a deep impression on her. After a while, the little girl happily ran to show her father the first diary of her life. When Yang-yi received it, he was a little surprised. He could actually read a child's diary. Yang-yi wanted to say, the diary is your privacy. You should keep it for yourself. However, when he saw the little girl's expectant gaze, which was waiting for her father to praise her, Yang-yi swallowed his words and began to read it seriously. He praised and commented seriously, You wrote very well. It's your first time writing a diary, but you can actually write so many words. However, your brother isn't crying because he's sad. You can change the words you use a little. Change it to guilt. Let's go. Daddy will check this word for you. See what it means and how to write it. There weren't many opportunities to read a child's diary. The little girl didn't have many personal secrets yet. Yang-yi had to cherish it. She only realized that there was something wrong with the missing teeth after she took a shower at night. After Murphy finished bathing the little girl, she took a hairdryer in the bedroom to dry the little girl's wet and thick hair. The little girl took the crystal hairband that her mother had placed on the dressing table and happily gestured in front of her head. It was as if she would look good wearing it. However, at this moment, she, who hadn't looked in the mirror today, was intoxicated by her beautiful appearance in the mirror. She couldn't help but giggle. Hence, you're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.